Gonna let the last few people in. Okay, so we'll get started. So welcome everyone to our third regional Trash Trap Network workshop. Today we'll be exploring the use of trash traps as part of the solution to local and global plastic solutions. Whether you're an expert in the field or new to the topic, we hope you'll find this workshop informative and engaging. So throughout the workshop, we will have various presentations and discussions that we hope will provide you with new insights and perspectives on trash trapping. And we encourage you to ask questions, share your thoughts and experiences throughout, and participate in the discussion. Today's workshop is also made possible from the support of our collaborators and supporters. And so I'd just like to take a moment to thank the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund for supporting the ITTN and allowing us to hold workshops such as this to meet all of you and to talk about this important issue together. And to bring us back to what we have coming up in today's workshop, here's a quick look at our main objectives for today. So our overarching goal for this workshop is to help you gain a deeper understanding of trash trapping and equip you with practical knowledge that you can apply in your local circumstances. Our objectives include sharing the value of trash trapping devices and their role in fighting plastic pollution, motivating collaboration between stakeholders in the region, sharing lessons learned from our experiences, and ultimately building a network of teams working towards a common goal of increasing our cleanup efforts and quantifying our impact collectively, and also building programs that engage the community and ultimately inform upstream management and solutions. And so we are absolutely thrilled to see so many interested groups and individuals here today connecting on this shared vision to reduce plastic pollution. So thank you again for joining, and we hope you enjoy the workshop. So to introduce myself, my name is Frond. I'll be one of your workshop facilitators for today, and I work with both the UFT Trash Team and Ocean Conservancy to coordinate the International Trash Trap Network. I've studied and worked in the field of plastic and microplastic pollution for a few years now, first studying in the UK and then working at the University of Toronto for a few years with Chelsea and the UFT Trash Team. And so as the coordinator of the network, I hope to be your point of call for any questions or information after our event today. I look forward to getting to know all of you throughout today's workshop. And so the ITTN will introduce a bit more about what we are in just a moment, but we are a collaborative program between the University of Toronto Trash Team and Ocean Conservancy. And so we have many individuals working together to make it a success. And so I want to give a brief introduction to the ITTN team, most of whom you'll get to know later on today, and you'll see they have their blue backgrounds on, so you can identify them really easily. So keep an eye out for these faces and you'll meet a few of them later. We're also very glad to have two guest speakers presenting today. We have Liao, and she's a marine social science consultant for the Azure Alliance based in Taiwan. And we also have Monique, who's an environmental educator for Tread Lightly Charitable Trust based in New Zealand. So today, both Pei and Monique will be sharing their expertise with us on trash trapping, each through their own local experiences. And we are incredibly fortunate to have them here with us today, and I am sure their insights and perspectives will be valuable to us all. So here's a closer look at our agenda for today. So once we conclude this intro, we'll move on to share more details about the ITTN and our vision for trapping trash as part of the solution to plastic pollution. Then we'll move straight into a quick another presentation from Chelsea Rochman about the UFT Trash Team at Ocean Conservancy and some local work and how the network formed. And then we'll move straight into a presentation about different trash trapping technologies that are currently in use, followed by a quick 10-minute break. When we return, we'll have our guest speakers present on their local projects with some time for questions and discussion during this session. And then after another quick break, we'll have Rafaela from the UFT Trash Team sharing the recipe for trash trapping success. So in this presentation, she digs into all the considerations you need to take note of along your journey from planning a project to ensuring it's successful in the long term. We'll have a 30-minute break so people can have a quick rest, and then we'll come back and then we will move into our breakout sessions to finish off the day. So during this session, the ITTN team will be facilitating some different presentations talking about specific aspects of trash truck operations, data collection, and outreach and communication. So during these sessions, we hope to encourage lots of knowledge sharing and discussion between all of you. So we really hope that you'll stick around for this part. So we've crammed a lot into today's workshop, but I hope you all leave feeling inspired and motivated to trap trash. So one final housekeeping note is that we do have time built in for Q&A during the different sessions. So our team will facilitate any questions and alternate between those who want to ask questions out loud and those who want to type them in the chat. When it's time for questions, if you want to ask a question out loud, use the raise your hand feature that you can find in the reactions menu on your Zoom screen. Once we point you out or say your name, you can unmute yourself, turn your camera on if you like, and ask your question to the group. Alternatively, you can type in the chat and we'll read your question aloud. Please also share your thoughts and join the conversation. You can tag us on social media, all those links are below, and on Twitter for those of you who still use it, and you can find us on Instagram too. Okay, so before we head straight into it, we want to turn the floor over to you. So first, we're interested to hear about what you're hoping to learn during today's workshop. So please share your thoughts in the chat. And I can read some of them out. I can share what I'm looking forward to if no one has thoughts. Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning who all the people on the call are and learning more about your different local work and what you plan to do or what you're already doing. Ooh. Okay, the poll just appeared. Whoops. And so that is my next question. So what type of group do you represent? Okay. I don't know why. I don't know why the poll cleared itself. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to relaunch it. So in the next question I have for you is what type of group do you represent? So please just choose your choice on the poll and we can see where everyone's from. So most are non-profit groups so far. We have a community group, a couple of people from government. Nice. Okay. Nice to see a bit of variety. So looking forward to all your different perspectives throughout the day. You can see, I'll just share quickly who responded to the poll. Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen for a moment and just switch to my next presentation to get us going. So bear with me one moment. And then we can get going into the next session. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing in the meantime, hoping to learn about the traps, and we're hoping to learn about the techniques or methods used to trap debris. Great, thank you for those answers. Okay, so I will get us started with our first presentation. Whoops. So to kick things off, I'm going to give a brief overview of the International Trash Trap Network, or the ITTN, which we call it to save ourselves a mouthful, and our goal to connect local solutions to tackle global plastic pollution. So as we all know, plastic pollution is a global issue. Plastic litters the entire globe from top to bottom and from the surface of the ocean to the deep sea. And so by weight, most of this plastic is large pieces like you see here in the top photo, but by count, most of it is microplastic. And because plastic waste has become so ubiquitous, microplastics have become pervasive, cycling in our water cycle, global dust cycles, and arguably as part of the carbon cycle too. For the impacts, we know that plastic litter can choke, entangle, and smother wildlife. And we've also learned that microplastics are leading to measurable risk in our oceans and freshwater environments, and that if we continue to allow concentrations to increase, that risk will become more widespread. And as a result, it's time to act now. The good news is that across the world, action has begun. The global movement really picked up in 2015 when the world agreed that 8 million tons of plastic going into the oceans each year was unacceptable. This estimate came from a famous study published by Jenna Jam-Beck and colleagues, and to this day, we still hear this number cited in many presentations and studies. However, we have some new numbers for this. So a newer model was published in Science in 2020, including some members of this team on that paper. And this study predicted that up to 34 million tons of plastic waste was emitted into aquatic ecosystems in the year 2020. This is 3 to 4 times the previous 8 million tons number. And this is because we included emissions from freshwater environments, but also due to an increase in production, consumption, and emissions of plastics since the previous study was published. And this model was then used to project into the future to determine how much plastic emissions are predicted to change under different scenarios for mitigation. And what we found was, if you follow the yellow line at the top, we're headed towards as much as 90 million tons of plastic emissions per year by just 2030 if we continue business as usual. So luckily, the world and most of us have not agreed upon this future, but we do have a lot of work to do. And that work to do falls into 3 general categories for mitigation. These include plastic waste reduction, which includes bans on single-use plastics and the reuse or recycling of plastics so they stay in the value chain. It includes waste management, so the collection of waste to be brought to a management facility. And finally, it includes cleanup, the strategy we'll be focusing on today. And so when we look to efforts that will be required to make meaningful difference to plastic emissions globally, we concluded from this study that there was no one-size-fits-all strategy to plastic pollution, and we need locally informed solutions. And while we agree it should not be the only part of the solution, our model suggested that waste reduction and sustainable management are critical, but cleanup is still a very important part of the equation. And so we need a combination of all 3 types of strategies to achieve global plastic reduction targets. And so a significant amount of plastic waste is already accumulated in the environment, and we know that cleanups around the world are collecting millions of pounds of trash each year, like you can see in this photo. But to make a measurable difference now and into the future, we need to increase our cleanup efforts even more by orders of magnitude. And so the question is, how can we do this? And this is where trash trucks come in. So trash trucks are technologies designed to clean up and divert plastics and other pollutants from our waterways. They can supplement cleanup efforts by running for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and by collecting waste items from large macro debris to small microplastics that are often very challenging to collect by hand. Because there are now a wide variety of devices available, a suitable device can be chosen for each scenario and waterway. So, for example, in a large river channel full of floating trash, a trash wheel might have the greatest impact. In a harbour front slip full of floating microplastics, sea bins might offer your best solution for cleanup. And so the primary benefit of trash trucks is, of course, to capture and divert waste, but they have other benefits too. So trash trucks can be a really great focal point for public education and awareness of plastic pollution. So by talking to the public about how they work and what they capture, we can demonstrate that plastic pollution is not a faraway issue, it's happening right on our doorstep, and cleanup is one of the ways to manage it locally. What's more, trash trucks can act as sampling tools for data collection. So by understanding what we capture and what the most common waste items are in our waterways, we can understand sources and inform upstream solutions and policies. So all of these things happen locally, but collectively, we can be part of the global solution. And so in realizing the value of trash trucks, both locally and globally, the ITTN, the International Trash Truck Network, was born. So we launched in March 2021, and the aims of the ITTN are to increase global cleanup efforts and to quantify our collective impact as part of the international coastal cleanup, which some of you will be very familiar with. So just as community groups collect trash and clean up data each year with the ITC, we do the same using trash traps. And we also aim to bring together local stakeholders to build trash trapping programs that will not only clean up our waterways, but engage the community and collect valuable data to inform upstream solutions and local policies. To measure the success of our trash trapping project, we've developed harmonized data collection methods that are easy to use from anyone ranging from community volunteers to scientists. So we have 2 protocols that groups can use, and we will delve into those later on. To record data, groups in the network can use paper data sheets, or they can use our free data trapper app. And for those familiar with Ocean Conservancy's CleanSpell app for recording cleanup data at the minute, we hope to have trash trapping data submission on CleanSpell very, very soon. Once you send your data in, the ITTN summarizes this at the end of each year, and we share annual reports of our international efforts, but we also create local reports on trash trapping achievements. So these include things like total weight of debris captured and your top items recorded. And so we wanted to do this to summarize data for each local group to make it as easy as possible for groups in the network to use your data to inform policies around preventing plastic pollution locally. All ICC data that we collect with the network is also publicly available within Ocean Conservancy's TIDES database, where it can be used by anyone for research to policy to education. So as I've mentioned, trash traps can be a great focal point for local education. And to assist with this, we've created posters that groups can position by their traps to draw attention to them, and activities such as a guided waste characterization that can be adopted for different locations, traps, age groups, and this creates opportunities for hands-on experiences and provides the opportunity for community members to understand their local plastic pollution sources and solutions. It's also been really great to see groups currently in the network to get creative with this. So an example here is Inspector Stephen, and he lives in a place called Tobermory in Canada. He's very cute and he gets lots of attention on the harbour front. Because of his nice big googly eyes, but he also has a QR code that you can scan to get more information about what the CBIN is and why it's there. Finally, we see the network as a platform to learn from each other and avoid reinventing the wheel as trash trapping efforts grow. So currently groups can share your data and connect with others via our social media channels. So we have an ITTN Facebook group, and you can go on there and ask questions or seek advice or meet groups in similar situations using similar tracks. We're also holding regional workshops such as this one to facilitate knowledge sharing among stakeholders in specific regions where we know the interest in trash trapping has grown. So we will share information on joining the network throughout today's workshop, but we've aimed to make it really simple to do so. So you just have to contact us. You can download our free resources from our website, and we have these in multiple languages. And as soon as you're ready with the trash trap installed, you can begin collecting your harmonized data and connect with other groups locally, globally, and locally. And so I'll share some of these links in the chat just now. And so before we move on to our next present, we're going to move on to our next presenter now. I will share those things in the chat in just a moment, but first up, I'll introduce our next speaker, which is Chelsea Rochman. So Chelsea Rochman is Head of Operations and Program Lead of Scientific Programming and Application for the U of T Trash Team. She's also Assistant Professor in Ecology at the University of Toronto and a Scientific Advisor to Ocean Conservancy. And Chelsea's been researching the sources, the sinks, and ecological implications of plastic debris for more than a decade. In addition to her research, she works to translate science beyond academia. And so Chelsea's going to give a bit of background on the trash team and Ocean Conservancy just now.
Thank you, Hannah. Can you see the right screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. As Hannah said, my name is Chelsea, and I'm going to talk today about a bit about the history of the International Trash Trap Network, and also through that I'll naturally introduce who the U of T Trash Team is, as well as who Ocean Conservancy is. And I'll start by introducing the U of T Trash Team because we started trapping trash here in 2019. We were really excited about it around 2017, and that's sort of where our work on this topic began. So the U of T Trash Team is a community outreach organization. Our goal is to increase waste literacy in our local community while reducing plastic pollution in our ecosystems. Our team was co-founded in 2017, and we use community outreach, education, and solution-based research in order to complete our goals and try to make our vision a reality. We have a real goal about thinking and working locally, but with the idea that the issue of plastic pollution is really global. And so we want to work at the local level, but we want to inspire others to work at their local level, and together at all of our local scales, we can make a global difference. So the way we wanted to get started was with a trash wheel. So some of you may be familiar with Mr. Trash Wheel. It was a real inspiration for our team. We wanted a trash bandit, a raccoon, which is our city's mascot, in a river with a lot of debris that comes down into the lake. We didn't end up with a trash bandit or a trash wheel, but we did end up starting a Fighting Floatables project on the waterfront with trash traps, starting with sea bins. And today we also have litter traps, and soon we'll have litter getter and other boom style traps. So we work closely with many local stakeholders on our waterfront to basically understand plastic pollution locally that comes into Lake Ontario, as well as to try to determine upstream solutions and try to prevent pollution. We work with other community outreach organizations, also with government like the City of Toronto and the Conservation Authority. We work with industry like Ports Toronto, and together this multi-stakeholder group is kind of the reason why I think our project has been so successful. So over the years, as we got started, we've added different projects to what we were doing. We started by trapping litter in a sea bin. Later, we were doing visual audits and putting out these trackers, basically GPS tagged bottles, to get an idea of what is the debris in our harbor, where does it come from, where does it go, and also to understand what are the hot spots for future traps. For example, today we have many litter traps along our waterfront. Last summer, our cohort of traps grew to more than 20. We had 11 sea bins and 10 litter traps. And this summer, we will have even more. So our project is growing, and we're also growing in terms of community partners, which is fantastic. The U of T Trash Team prides ourselves on really being ran, and basically the engine of our team is youth. So they're university students, both undergrads and grad students, who come up with a lot of the ideas that we bring out into our city. And so we hire students every year to quantify the litter that we capture and to characterize it. It's really important to us that the methods are sound. And so over the years, we've created standardized protocols so that we can quantify and characterize the litter accurately, and so that we can get good data on what it is that we're capturing, both measuring our impact, but also informing upstream solutions, which I'll talk about in a bit. These protocols have become the protocols that are on the ITTN website. So they are the simple and the detailed protocol that we share with members of the network in order to collect and share their own data. And over the years, what's been really fun is our partner groups have grown. So when we started, we were working with Ports Toronto. We also have a close collaboration with MCD, and I think Min is here. Hi, Min. MCD is also trapping trash in Vietnam on the Red River. And we have been working with them as well, learning their protocols, sharing our protocols, and thinking about how what they're doing is reducing debris in Vietnam. We also inspired the Great Lake Plastic Cleanup, which is now many groups trapping trash along the Great Lakes. And so as our team sort of started to grow and we started working globally, we really wanted to come back to that original goal of thinking globally, but acting locally, and trying to inspire more to act local to again solve this global problem. Now, I've been working with Ocean Conservancy for 15 years. But this project really helped us work even closer. Like I've been working with them forever, but I think it hasn't been until the ITTN that I meet with them almost every day in some other capacity. And it's wonderful. It was a really natural collaboration to build the International Trash Trap Network with Ocean Conservancy because of the International Coastal Cleanup. So for those of you unaware of the International Coastal Cleanup, this was started by the Ocean Conservancy more than 35 years ago. Many of you on this call are partners of the International Coastal Cleanup, where you go out and you clean your beaches and waterways. And often the data is recorded and captured on the Clean Swell app. Ocean Conservancy creates and curates this global database, shares the data every year on what they collect, and this data can go on to inform both local as well as global impacts. So we felt that the International Trash Trap Network would be a really nice addition under the umbrella of the ICC or the International Coastal Cleanup, sort of similar to Project Aware, where they're picking up debris diving. So the Dive Against Debris program. And the International Coastal Cleanup has a really nice track record over the years of using their data to inform policy. And that's really our goal too. For us, trash traps are more than just cleanup. They also are community outreach to increase awareness about the issue, but also to inform policies to reduce plastic pollution. So every year we quantify and we characterize our impact. And now that the ITTN exists, we get this card every year that tells us what we've collected and what we're collecting. And I think the what we're collecting on the next slide is really the most important thing that we can use in order to inform the work we do upstream. So these are the types of items that we collect here in Toronto. Some of these may be common to what you collect in cleanups at home. And we also collect a lot of small stuff, including pre-production pellets, little bits of styrofoam. So we use this data to inform upstream solutions. And that's the last bit I'll talk about today. So these are some of the top items that we find: foam, pre-production plastic pellets, cigarette butts, and single-use foodware. So we've created projects that help us better understand them and reduce the amount that is in the environment. So here you can see we're doing a project which is called In Pursuit of Polystyrene. We have a lot of styrofoam that we find on our beaches. We had a feeling it was not coming from takeout containers. It looked different. We created a library of foam from construction. We saw that it had bromine chemicals in it. And we went out to the beaches and the waterfront and we asked how many of these plastics have bromines. The reality was about half, which suggests that more than half of the plastics, the foam that we see in our samples, are from construction. And now we're trying to work with the city to see how we can reduce construction foam in our waterfront. Next, we have a project on pre-production plastic pellets. These are the pellets made from industry. We have a lot of it upstream, which means we have a lot of them downstream and in our sea bins. So we are actually working with Enviropod, who makes the Litotrap, to put Litotraps upstream in different manufacturing sites and trying to see whether that reduces the amount that we see downstream. So we're working with government, with the Canadian Plastic Industry Association, which is now called the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada, and as I said, Enviropod, who makes the Litotrap. For cigarette butts, we're doing an arts-based educational campaign where we're trying to basically increase awareness that cigarette butts are plastic pollution. We've created posters that our students have drawn and curated through their artistic. We have great artists in our group. We've had these around the city. We created a documentary to try to understand what do people know about cigarette butts. And we quantified the amount of litter throughout our campaign and actually saw a reduction of cigarette butts during our campaign. And finally, Rafaela, who will speak to you today, is leading a project on single-use foodware, trying to work with NGOs in the city to understand what is the barrier to having more single-use foodware, to having less single-use foodware and more reusables. What do restaurants and cafes need to be more successful? And what does the public want? And so over the next several hours in this workshop, we're basically inviting you to trap trash with us and join the International Trash Trap Network. We hope that you too can collect data to increase awareness in your local community, to increase information so that you can reduce plastic pollution upstream, and of course, divert plastic and clean up your waterways. So I want to thank, of course, all of the people that we work with, and hopefully you will stay in touch. So thank you so much. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if people have them, for myself or Hannah, before we move on to the next session. Anyone have any questions, or you can raise your hand or type them in the chat. And if not, we'll carry on. We don't expect to have too many questions at this point. Okay, well, we don't have any questions. And I think we'll take an opportunity to go ahead on to the next session, which I think is Hannah, correct? And so Hannah's going to be going over some of the different trash trapping technologies. So the next session, Hannah's going to introduce what are some of the types of traps that are out there, and what are the types of considerations you might think about if you're thinking about getting a trap, in terms of how you decide the best one, for example, and build your own network. So Hannah, I will turn it over to you to share your screen.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So, okay, great. So now I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through some of the different trash trapping technologies that are currently in use around the world, and a little bit of info about how to make sense of all the information out there, because there is a lot to look at. So trash traps is what we call them, but they go by many other names as well, including trash capture devices, capture technologies, cleanup technologies, debris interception technologies, and so on. And so they all work to do a very similar job, and that is to either prevent or collect anthropogenic waste from our environment. So through growing the network, we had a few requests for information about what's out there, including any available info on price and who you can contact the manufacturing devices, or advice about what device might be right for you. And so we've developed a device directory. And so in this document, we've split the different devices into 7 to 8 broad categories, which I'll go through today. And these include stationary skimmers, booms and barriers, storm drain traps, automotive, vacuum devices, stormwater outflow traps, and skimmer vessels, although other people might refer to them under different headings, so we'll see. Okay, so when thinking about what device might be the right one for you and your location and scenario, there are a few different things to consider. So first is your environment or your location. So where are you going to put the trap? Is your target location a river channel, a lake, a coastal ocean, or within an urban stormwater system? Second is your target pollution. So how often the goal is to capture waste and as much of it as we can, but sometimes groups might have a specific pollutant in mind that they see lots of in their local area. So for example, microplastics. And for this goal, some devices are better than others at capturing the small stuff. Third is cost. So trash traps often cost money to purchase and maintain, and the price tag can really range from extremely low cost if you choose to make a device yourself, to much more pricey for things such as skimmer vessels and trash wheels on the higher end of the scale. Fourth thing to consider is maintenance. So how often does the trap need to be emptied? Or how often do you want to empty it? Or how often can you empty it, depending on your people power? Fifth is capacity. So some traps have collection points that can hold large amounts of waste, dumpsters full of waste. These are great for situations where maintenance is less frequent, but this does often mean there is a lot of waste to remove at once, which might require more than just some keen volunteers with strong arms to remove it. You might need a crane or some other infrastructure to help. If this is not an option, then there are also devices which have much smaller capacity and catch bags, and these need emptying slightly more often, but this is generally a really quick and easy job. So last consideration, but not least, is visibility. So Do you want your trap to be really obvious and visible to the public to draw attention to it, or do you want it to be more discreet? So this could differ depending on if you're hoping for it to be an attraction for the community and a focal point for outreach, or do you want it to blend into the environment and do its job in a less obvious way? Some devices are big and bright and can do the former, and some are small and discreet and fit into the less obvious category. Whoops, skipped ahead there. So in thinking about these factors, I'm about to dive into some examples of devices that are currently in use around the world and how they compare. But first, I'd like to know what type of environment you were targeting or hoping to target for cleanup using a trash trap. I'm going to open another poll just now, and hopefully you'll see this one. So we've got options of river, harbour, open water, storm drain, land, other. So let me know, and then I can hopefully talk a bit more about the ones that you're interested in. So we've got a few river and harbour and open water so far. Okay. Well, a real mix now. We've got storm drain, land, other. If you, I should share the poll in just a moment so everyone can see if you can't already see. Yeah, I'm going to end the poll so you can see what everyone said. So you can see what everyone has said. And if whoever chose other, I'd love for you to share what the other environment is in the chat so the rest of us can know what your scenario is. But I will move on so we stay on time and we can come back to the chat a little bit later. So first up, stationary skimmers. So we use an example of these sea bins along the Toronto harbour front to collect debris. These are essentially floating trash cans that sit on the surface of the water. They're mounted to a dock as an example, and they collect floating trash, including microplastics. From the types that are available to purchase at the minute, it seems they can range in cost from about $6,000 to $12,000 US, and they range in capacity, but for sea bins, they're quoted to hold approximately 20 kilos of debris. They need to be emptied daily or weekly, depending on your environment and the amount of trash collected. And because stationary skimmers are smaller and often situated around docks, they can be discreet, although there are larger and more obvious models around. So for example, in the corner, the red collector is very large and bright and you can't really miss it. But the smaller models can be made more visible by positioning signs and posters nearby, like we saw with the Inspect to Sea Bin sign that I showed earlier. Next up are mobile skimmers. So I like to think of these as little floating robots with mouths that eat up the trash, be it floating or on the beach. They're often used in semi-confined waters and along coastlines, so they can be remotely controlled by the users. And because of their drone-style design, they tend to be on the higher end of the cost. But from the information available, average cost is around 20,000 USD. One of these devices. I appreciate USD might not be helpful for all, but translating them all is tricky. So because you can target litter during each use, they're actually comparably quite cost effective because you can spend quite a short amount of time and capture a lot of litter in one go. Each time the device is used and comes back to shore, it needs to be emptied. And so depending on how polluted your waterway is, you can collect quite a large amount of debris during each use. The capacity of these devices has been said to range up to 160 kilos of debris, which makes them pretty useful for collecting a large amount of trash compared to stationary skimmers. And finally, because they are quite cool little contraptions, they do have quite high visibility. So you'll likely have someone come up to you and ask what you're doing when you're using one of these on the beach or in the harbour front, because they are very interesting and unusual. So next up we have storm drain traps. These are, surprise, positioned within storm drains, and they capture urban debris that is often washed into these drains during rainfall events. So they often either have a grate or a catch basin within the drain to collect debris, And options such as this trap, for example, offer different mesh sizes for the catch basin, depending on the size of debris that you're targeting. For example, you can get a fine mesh available if you're looking to capture pellets and smaller microplastics. And because of their relatively simple design, they are one of the cheaper options for trash traps, and they are also pretty low maintenance. On average, they require emptying around 2 to 3 times per year, compared to weekly for some other types of traps. And because no storm drain is the same, often the manufacturers of these devices have also designed them to be adjustable by size and shape depending on the basin. Because they are hidden in the ground, these are low visibility traps. But again, with signage and with adding things around the traps, you can draw attention to them and let people know that they're there and what they do. A more industrial version of storm drain traps are what I call stormwater outflow traps. And these are often in line in the storm pipe, are positioned at the end of the pipe in a stormwater system. These too can capture a broad range of debris down to 2 millimeters. And because of the large amount of trash that they capture, they often require a vehicle such as a vacuum truck for debris removal, which means annual costs can be much higher, and they should consider maintenance and payment for the debris removal, because often you'll have to work with a partner to do this. Again, as these are hidden underground or positioned in a location at the end of the pipe where not many people go, they can have low visibility, but very big impact if a lot of waste is entering the environment through these systems. Next up, we have river traps, which a few of you were seemingly very interested in if you're looking to trap trash in your local rivers. So for these environments, booms and barriers are really great for collecting floating debris along a river channel. So purchasing these from a manufacturer can cost upwards of 2,000 USD, and they can be low cost and very low tech. And so for this reason, they're really great as a DIY trap. And because they're essentially a barrier to stop passing trash, debris removal can be quite flexible, and the frequency of this can be decided upon depending on how much litter you're collecting and how often you can go and remove it. There are many different versions of these devices, and some are very industrial looking and large, like the blue barriers in the bottom right. Others are much more simple, such as the water goat, which is in the top right photo, made from floating buoys tied together. So there are lots of different types of these. Next is what we refer to as barriers and booms with a collection point, or barriers and booms plus, as I put here. These work the same as the previous barriers. However, your collection is directed to a central point with storage. So these have a slightly greater average cost than simple booms because of these collection points, and it can range upwards of the number I've got on the screen. And so because the collection point has a certain capacity, often these need to be emptied weekly. But again, it depends on how polluted your waterway is, the size of the box, if you had a rainfall event, and so on. These devices tend to get a lot of public attention. You can really take advantage of this by adding fun logos, branding, or in the example of Mr. Trash Wheel and the other trash wheels on the bottom right, you can even add googly eyes or give your trap a personality and a name. So that's quite fun. Okay, so next we're on to slightly more industrial types of traps. So these are seen less frequently, but are really great for coastal and beach cleanups on land. So vacuum devices, they work like a vacuum. They suck up litter within their path. The only limitation of these is that they can't collect anything larger than the vacuum pipe diameter. So they're suited to smaller debris and microplastics. From the information available, it seems they average at around 4,500 USD for purchase. And vacuum devices in these images are on the larger side, but certain organizations such as Hula One are currently developing smaller versions of these devices. So I think these are due to come out in the short-term future. Keep an eye out for those if you're interested. Their large size does have an advantage though. So they can collect a lot of trash with each use due to their large storage bins. The Enviro Buggy on the bottom photo has approximately 1 cubic meter of storage space to hold debris while you clean up. Similarly to the automotives I spoke about earlier, these are man-powered and so are highly visible, and you can expect a lot of spectators and questions when you are using them. Finally, we have skimmer vessels. So these are boats that work on waterways to trap trash and bring it ashore. They range in cost, similarly to how you'd expect a boat and other vessels to range in cost. And their capacity is as large as the boat hull, again, highly varied. Because of their size, they are high visibility, and this can be enhanced by adding bright colors or logos. So you can see in the top left, Fort Ocean have done this with their skimmer vessel. They've made it bright blue and put their logo on it. Okay, so that was quite a lot of information, I know, and I don't expect you to remember everything that I just shared, but luckily we have it written down for you in our device directory. So we've linked this in your attendee package that you should have received before the workshop. We will also share it again after the workshop today, so you'll have a chance to look at that afterwards. And after you receive this, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay. That is it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hannah. We have about 9 minutes for questions. Any questions on anything you've heard up to now, and then we will take a 10-minute break. If anyone has a question, just go ahead and either type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand by clicking over the reactions, and it should give you an opportunity to do that.
I was speedy.
And while we're waiting, Hannah, I think in the chat, the other was coastal shorelines.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'm curious, I think this is from Patty, if that's a beach or a different kind of terrain. Are there other types of coastal ones besides the bee-bot or like the beach groomers, Hannah?
Yeah, so there's the drone style ones that can kind of go along the beach and rake the sand, but there's also types of vacuum devices, and some of them have been developed to be used on sand, but also on rocky shorelines as well. They're much more kind of nimble. You can go on rougher terrain. That's quite nice as well if you've got not a beach. I think.
Patty, did you want to add anything more? I saw a raised hand and then a thumbs up. Here's a question in the chat. Can the robot devices distinguish between litter and organic matter like shells? Question.
It's a good question, Monique. So from the ones I've seen and seen in action, a lot of them are designed to either, so for example, I just mentioned one. So one is, it goes along with coastline, it's called a bee-bot, and it's got a kind of sieve system that's shaped as it's collecting debris. So you can target certain areas of the beach where you've got a lot of plastic and potentially not as much organic matter, and then it kind of sifts out all the sand in smaller pieces before it gets into the collection point. But there are obviously some things like shells and wooden debris that can get caught in there as well. So I know of some groups who use that device and they sort through everything, and anything that a locally important species or something that they don't want to take off the beach, they make sure to separate that out and put it back. But yeah, it depends how you use it. I think you can target the drift line and kind of get everything, which means you get a lot of organic as well, but you can target different areas. So sand, yes. Other organic matter, not so much.
And thanks, Hannah. You have another question which says, thank you for the presentation. I assume the types of trash traps that each country prefers are different. Is there a report or data that identifies the type and quantity of trash traps frequently used by different countries? Is there a report now or in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Probably the answer would be we're collecting that data at the minute through the network. So we, through people sending in their data, we also record what type of trap groups are using. So I can say, for example, because we're based in Canada and the US, we know that a lot of groups in Canada and the US are using things like sea bins and those stationary skimmer type of traps. But as we learn more and more about that, I expect it will be very different between country to country. So yeah, not enough information on that yet, but I'd love to know. It's a good question.
And then you have another question, which is it possible to get some DIY help or ideas from ITTN for those of us in the small Pacific communities that can't buy spendy tech? This is something we think about a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we definitely think about this a lot because that's a big barrier for a lot of groups, is that the upfront cost can be huge for these tracks. So I suppose one, we have a lot of in the device directory, there's definitely some examples of the lower tech types of tracks. And also, I guess another good idea would be if you have questions for groups that might have already done this, hopefully we can connect you through the network to groups that might have experience in making their own tracks and make those connections so you can communicate between the two of you and learn from what they've done before rather than trying to start from scratch.
And Hannah, what is the name of the group that are they in Indonesia that actually has kind of like a DIY blueprint for a trap? Yeah,
there is a group. I can share them on the chat. I'll get the link in a moment. The name has gone from my head at the moment, but there is a group actually. Yeah, they've developed a type of design for a trap that can be used, made with local materials, and they've actually published the blueprint online. Plastic Fisher, the name comes to me. So I will share the link to their website in the chat. So yeah, they have something that you can take and use it yourself. It's a good idea, Chelsea. Well remembered.
And Patty's got the screen up. I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Oh, yeah, camera's gone. Does anyone have any final questions or comments before we go into a break?
Can I just
go ahead?
Add something? Yeah. Okay. So, greetings to everybody. My respects. I seem to have. I'm using my phone, so I wasn't able to respond quickly. But so I live in an island, and we have a lot of these areas, man-made, with coral and so forth. But when I mentioned coastal shorelines, we have a lot. It's not necessarily the beach, but just areas where there's, we have a body of water that's settled against a causeway or against a big area. So, but a lot of we noticed that a lot of the trash that come in actually from, I mean, we never know. I mean, the currents just bring in a lot to, to the shorelines, and that's what we're actually experiencing. We also have found out that a lot of the ships that go by, have managed to dump trash along the way. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing here on these small islands in the Pacific region.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I wonder for some of these like beach terrain, these robots that are made for this, or trash traps that are maybe not necessarily robots, how they do on different types of terrain, like rocky areas, or I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of them are newer, so I don't actually know how many of them have been tested in that type of environment. I'd be interested to hear from people who might have tried them.
Okay, well, I think we are just about at the top of the hour, so I know everyone's in a slightly different time zone, so we're going to come back at 10 after. So whatever time it is for you, you'll come after it. You'll come back at 10 after, so go ahead and grab water, take a break. When we come back, we'll just turn on our cameras and microphones and let you know that we're back, give a quick hi, and then we'll go ahead and continue. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Got about 1 more minute. Oh. Okay, and I think we are at 10 after. So if people are back, maybe just give a thumbs up or a wave or something, and we'll see that you are there. Or if I can see your face, then I know you're really there. And then I think our next session, we're going to turn it over to Rafaela to introduce our two speakers.
All right. Thanks, Chelsea. I will give 1 more minute. I can see thumbs up. All right, so I think we can start. It's my pleasure to introduce the next two guest speakers, and I will share my screen here with the first guest. See, all right, can you see my slides?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our first guest speaker is Dr. Chun-Pei Liao. We call her Pei. Pei is a prominent marine social scientist specializing in the complex relationship between human activity and the coastal environment. With a PhD from the Department of Environment, Biology and Fishery Science at the National Taiwan Ocean University, Dr. Pei brings a wealth of expertise to her research in the fields of fisheries policy, marine protected areas, and marine debris. So we are very excited to have her here today. Thanks so much for joining our workshop. So Pei, the floor is yours. I will stop sharing my screen and you are welcome to share your screen.
Thank you. Thank you for your nice introduction. So thank you so much for your nice introduction. So and my screen is clear for everyone?
Yes, it is.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So hello everyone. I'm Pei. We are the Azure Alliance. It's such a great honor to bring this workshop to share our experiment with you. And as a marine social scientist, my perspective today will be more focused on the social side, but if you have any more questions, I believe our co-founder and our member will be more than happy to answer that. So she is Chair Chen, we call her Chair. She is our co-founder of Azure Alliance. So our group is not a very big group. We are non-government and non-profit organizations. So the people you can see in the photo is almost every team member of our team. So today I believe the chair, we team, me and Xiaoming will be on live with everyone. So Azure Alliance is actually being established at 2018, and it's almost like 6 years experiment on building the smart remote control marine debris removal drone, or I will say the smart vessel. So in the newest models. So it's a great honor to share the trip with everyone. I'm wondering, I don't know if the participants today here have been chance to visit Taiwan, but Taiwan have a really highest density of the artificial offshore. I would say it's in the mainland of the Taiwan, we have over 55% of the artificial mainshore, and with the ongoing, I mean, still have a lot of fishing boats on 220 fishing ports. So it's approximately 5 kilogram per one fishing port. It's very high density. So as a fishery science background, I would like to show some interesting picture with you. So here it's a travel, the Tronate travel I have been attend on 2050. You can see at that pictures, a lot of fish with natural marine debris like bamboo or wood, and some, if you can see, a little bit of plastic. and some fishing gear. So my job is to collect the fish, to wet them, and to record them, and let us say hers. But if we zoom in, we can see more like the one-time use plastic, most of our food packaging. So but you can see most of them are the natural debris. So in that time, I noticed that it's really like marine debris really close to the to not only the offshore resident, but also the fishermen on the sea. And like 2 years ago, I have been attending the other trip on the Great Shan Island, which is located at the northern east of Taiwan. So in that time, the trawler was getting deeper. We do the trawler into the sea approximately 618 meters, so it's quite deep. So in that deep, only one fishing trawler, you can see we collect a lot of amazing creatures, but also a lot of marine debris. Like you can see if we compare with like the area of the debris and the fishing catch, it's kind of almost equal, the equal area, but the weight is more lighter. But since the situation is getting serious in different marine habitat, or I would say in different zones of the water. So here is the chair. So ITTN have developed in 6 years ago is because when we go into the recreation activity near the shore, we go scuba diving or normal diving, and we look up at the sky. You can see the sky is look like this. It's like a painting. It's a lot of marine debris there. So in that time, we're trying to do a very simple collection by clean up activity, but all the members are from like the ocean related research background. So we think like, what can we do more to improve the marine debris collect efficiency, and also affect the other to raise the residents' awareness on not using that much plastic, or to do some policy in effective. So here it's the port we call Beetle. So you can see a lot of volcano form on the sea due to the typhoon hit the northern Taiwan. And under the sea, it's actually be very full, very abundant marine diversity. A lot of coral are habitat there. And in tradition, a lot of fishing port in Taiwan, the government actually do the marine debris collect work, but they do in traditional way. For example, they will hire the people who collect the marine debris with a traditional tool, and it can be only collect the very close debris. So after an year, we observed almost all the fishing port in the Taiwan. We found out there are a lot of challenge on the collecting marine debris, which including over reliance on the manpower and high cost of the cleaning ship. If some harbor they have the budget to do that, it's still very high cost. And also the port cleaning for flexibility, they can collect the debris like far away from the coast. And also in most of situation, the air pollution and the high carbon emission will be caused during the cleaning behavior. So so that it's a motivation and why we are doing that to build a remote control marine debris clean vessel, or I will say drum. So at the first beginning, because we are the research student that time, so we don't have any budget. So we collect the tool we can see around our life. So it's a very simple container we can get. We are trying to actually, it's kind of like we take the sea beam as a very good role model, and we are trying to build the equipment that can collect the debris by themselves. And we go to the aquaculture pool to do an experiment. But in that, and then we found out in that time it's really hard to clean, to let the equipment collecting the marine debris by themselves. So we change our design system by time to time, which we will be have more detail on that. So here it's the we call it Azure Fighter. The Azure Fighter 0.8 will be collecting still not, it's not remote control system. It's a stable equipment to could be stay in the corner of the fishing port. So here is the video. If we can see it, yeah, it runs very well. So in that time, you can see the Azure Fighter is not cannot be controlled. It will be stay in the corner of the fishing port. And in daytime, our capacity is we can collect 428 kilograms on the 180 hours experiment, which will achieve like the collecting rate 2.93 kg per hour. So at the 2017, we are doing the experiment in a very busy fishing port. You can see on the low tide and high tide, they have a pretty good collecting rate, but we found out while the wind bring the debris far from the coast, it was really hard to collect it. So we improve our system to improve the Azure Fighter can be remote control. So actually today we will be talking about more on the Azure Fighter 2.5, and in this year we also be design and research on our newest system as 3.0, which will be mentioned a little bit. So here it's I will say the pilot project of the employment of the Azure Fighter on the local community at the Beetle Fishing Port in New Taipei City at last year. So here it's the location of our pilot project. So before we have the pilot project on the local community, we set the four, or I would say the three basic goals to implement this pilot project, which including the basic environmental investigation and how can we do the actual environmental cleanup, and also could we really affect the local resident by through the education or the other contribution like input our collecting debris in circular economy, and furthermore, can we really raise the local their conservation perception through the pilot project. So at the first beginning, we do the environmental investment to ensure the places we select, it's the first priority should be focused. And for the level 2, we are in that time we are if we under the capacity, if we have time, we are really we are trying our best to do the education of the and so to get them know more about the Azure Fighter. The biggest purpose is we want to that the normal public don't afraid of the new technology to collect the marine debris. So, and also during that, we have some industry, we take the collaboration with other industry to recycle like glasses and also the fishing gear to do the other material to go into the circle economy to do the material. For example, the desk and table for the children. And let me see, because let me jump into the video of the Azure Fighter 2.5. They collecting the debris in our pilot project at last year, 2020 summer. So yeah, you can see even our how to put in English, the shape of the collecting bandit, it's quite big, but we still can collect like the small debris. So a lot of styrofoam too. So, and during the last year, we want to share our collecting efficiency, or I would say marine debris collect removal rate. We can achieve the average removal rate to approximately 85 kilometers per hour. But you can see during the different months, the removal rate will have the big range. For example, at the September and October, it's the biggest season of the typhoon hitting. So after typhoon coming, the debris will getting really high, as you can see in the picture. So after we collecting the debris, we will also record it as basically follow the ICC form. And we waited and collect how many of it, and the bag you over on the background you can see is a volcano foam and also some bamboo, because during our policy right now, this kind of natural marine debris, it's not, well, it will not allowed to go into the processing system, so we just put in there. So, and also when we analyze the composition of the marine debris with the total amount of 4,500 kilometers, we can see in the last year, we got the 87% of the general debris. So as a scientist, we have faced a lot of challenge because we are trying to do the data analyzing and collecting in the best way, but under the limitation of the working capacity, we can just put the general debris, the breaking debris, put on the floor and record it after. But like the PET bottle, fishing gear, styrofoam, and glasses bottle, of those we can collect it at the first time very easily and clear. And also we do some environmental analysis to see what kind of environmental impact will affect the marine debris more. So from the last year's data, we can see the tide range and also the winds, it's the biggest environmental impact. And also we interview a local resident to make sure we have the same picture on the, on the clean community. And so here are some very simple questions we ask the local resident. So in Beetle fishing community, they are have the 800 people are registered their house there, but actually it's not in the from the Monday to Friday is only 200 people live there. But on holidays, a lot of people will go there to climb the mountain and go to fishing. So when we ask the people some marine debris perception question, we found out the people who their livelihood who directly related to the ocean resources much care about and more agree about the marine debris issue. And also, we can see from the questions at the first beginning, most of the residents, they didn't think the Azure Fighter or such the smart remote control marine debris drone will change the environment. But after they observe like unless 2 months after, their agreement, their support are getting improved. And even though some of them are not agree, some of fishermen think the Azure Fighter is too small, but they truly, but they agree the Azure Fighter or the pilot project employment really raise the local resident and bring them to the action. For example, when we do the work, the fishermen, they will go to give a lot of hands. So, and also here is a situation we mentioned, is to, it's, I will say, also I want to ask a question to Charles, how many human or I would say capacity we need to, to identify those marine debris due to, we call it like 4,000 kilograms. It's almost, so far it's almost impossible for us to really identify all of them. Anyway, on 2020, we are our co-founder chair. They are working so hard on the newest system, the Azure Fighter 3.0. So the new system, the remote control will be use a 4G LTE and 2.4G remote control system, and which the capacity could be 200 liters per time, like per trip. And it's a whole electronic and with a low it's a zero I would say carbon emissions. So I would say we in Taiwan we actually noticed the marine debris issue from the Ocean Conservancy and also from the NGO. Then the government, they noticed, but the government non-government organization like us who develop and improve the effort on investigating or research, design the technology to collect new technology to collect the marine debris. It's almost it's really less. I would say not more than 2. So during this challenge, we hope and we will really love to contribute our effort and share our data to the global society to cooperate to make this could achieve the progress, could get into the goal to achieve fight for the more Azure oceans. So here is a photo, both show the Azure Fighter 2.5 and Azure Fighter 3.0. So we are in this year we are working on the Azure Fighter 3.0, and in the future we will cooperate with the National Taiwan Ocean University, because it will have like it will like remote sensor, a lot of environmental sensor on there, so we can be really scientific and more clear to analyze the marine debris hotspot and do a more efficient collecting behavior. So that's my presentation today. Thank you.
Amazing, Pei. Thank you so much. That was so fun to see it. We were so excited to see your work. And actually, what you were presenting here help us to think in the future. And some of the groups were asking you, do it yourself? And you gave an excellent example of how we can all put our hands up and try to do something. So thank you so much. We will, if you have questions for her, you can send in the chat, or you can hold, because we will have time for Q&A at the end. But before the Q&A, I would like to introduce our second speaker. Let me open the slide so you can see her picture. Can you see it, my slide with Monique Russell?
Yes.
All right, so our second guest speaker is Monique. Monique is an environmental educator based in Auckland, New Zealand. Monique's love of the nature, of the natural world, developing her teams through time spent paddling over lakes and wandering through the forests of North Ontario, Canada. And Monique now calls Auckland home, and she thrives on sharing her passion for nature with Kiwi kids of all ages through her work as an environmental educator. She has been working in this space for over 15 years, initially facilitating in school programs such as Environmental School and Trees for Survival, and now through developing and delivering sustainability theme programs for different organizations. So since 2020, Monique has been running a citywide citizen science program called Stormwater's Love. which focuses on engaging students to investigate stormwater pollution on their school grounds. So thank you so much, Monique. The floor is yours. You can share your screen. Let me see.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. All right, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. Okay. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. And as you can hear, I am Canadian and Toronto is my home stomping grounds. I grew up playing in Lake Ontario and the Little Tobacco Creek, which were not in such great shape then. So hopefully they are better now, especially with all that work happening in Toronto. And today I would like to introduce you guys to my trash trapping citizen science project. It's called Stormwater Sleuths. For anybody who isn't familiar with that word sleuths, which we also discovered, we probably should have called it drain detectives, because most of the students I work with also are not familiar with that word, but sleuthing, being a detective, is the idea. We wanted children to be really putting on that curious lens and looking at something that they normally just walk past. But I'd also like to introduce you to the Tread Lightly Charitable Trust, which is the organization that I work for. So the Tread Lightly Charitable Trust is an organization that's really committed to educating students and their families about the environmental implications of their everyday lives. We also want to get them to really think about their lifestyle choices and inspire positive student-led behavior change, which creates actual environmental benefits. The main ways that Tread Lightly works in the community is through 2 mobile classrooms. So we've got the Tread Lightly Caravan, which focuses on your lifestyle choices, such as minimizing resource use and minimizing waste and other related issues. And we also have the Tread Lightly Drain Game, which has a focus on water pollution and developing and understanding how everything that we do on land will affect our waterways, and making sure that they understand how our wastewater and stormwater systems work. We also support schools that might want to take action after they've had the caravan visit the school, such as a community litter blitz or some other kind of environmental action. And we also have been running the Stormwater Sleuths project at the schools since 2020. So that's a citizen science project, which has been run at, it's actually in total 17 schools, because we trialed it at 2 different schools before we really launched it on the big scale, but at 15 schools over the last 2 years. And this is a map of Auckland, and you can see that we've got a school right up at the very kind of northern reaches, and at this end, we've got a couple of rural schools mixed in with all of our urban schools as well. Okay. So Auckland has a lot of issues with water pollution. A lot of them can't be solved with trash trapping, but we do have pretty significant issues with gross pollutants in our waterways, and it's pretty noticeable on our beaches. So we put this project towards schools to ask if they wanted to, well, the kids wanted to find out if their schools were contributing to the problem through litter on their school grounds, because it was pretty easy to say, oh, it's all the other people doing it. And so we asked the kids the question, does our school contribute to stormwater pollution in our catchment? And the students used, they used publicly available information that we have on their catchments and their infrastructure to understand where the pollutants from their school could potentially end up. So go pop into that's our big question here. The students really did think that their schools probably contributed, because one little look around their school grounds, there was quite a bit of litter. So that was how they developed their hypotheses, that they were pretty sure that they were all contributing to pollution in their catchments. And so our next step involved selecting a suitable stormwater drain to host a litter trap, which was the device that we decided to use. So as you all know now from the previous presentations, a litter trap is an anti-pollution device that is designed to collect any gross pollutants. It sits inside that catch pit, and anything in the ones that we have, it only collects things that are over 5 millimeters, and stops them from passing through into our waterways. You can see from these photographs that there's quite a few, as discussed before, different sizes and shapes to fit into the various catch pits. We actually chose these as well because they are a bit discreet, and the nature of the project is that the children are actually gathering data for a few months before they let the school community know that the trap was there. So they could actually get a picture of what the behavior was at the school and be able to accurately measure if there was any behavior change after the project was publicly notified and they knew what was happening. Stormwater 360, which is the company that distributes them in Auckland, were really awesome and installed the traps for us at every school. And the students and teachers were taught how to safely remove and empty the traps. Every time the trap was emptied, the students actually sorted and audited the contents, and they would record their catch on a spreadsheet that was shared with me. So we had a good database of everything that had been trapped in our various traps. And in the second year of the project, which was 2022, each school term, I would visit the school and we would actually perform an audit using the methodology that was set up for the litter intelligence platform. And I think I've got a slide. Oh, this is a slide up. The children doing lots of auditing. So this is them sorting the material that they found and separating out organic matter from the waste, and then sorting all the rubbish into every conceivable category that you could think of. So the Litter Intelligence Platform is a web-based initiative from Sustainable Coastlines, which is another Auckland-based charitable trust. And their aim was to collate data from beach cleanups all around Aotearoa, New Zealand. And they have since expanded that to include both stormwater and freshwater monitoring methods. And so their method is slightly different from the standard one that we had been using for the schools, because the teachers and the students are monitoring these traps even when people from Tread Lightly are not present. So we had a really simplified method for them to do it. So each term, Tread Lightly would visit the schools and do our trap empty, but we also ran a lot of additional learning activities around the schools to connect them back to the topic and also to the school curriculum. So that included maths activities, calculating potential litter loads had they had a trap in every single drain at school, statistical analysis and displays, so looking at what they've caught and what that means. Site surveys going all around their schools and mapping where the hot spots were for the litter so they could come up with strategies to redirect it. Literacy tasks so they could communicate their findings, and really high impact actions came out of that, like asking the tuck shop to change the sort of packaging that they were using that they were finding caught in the trap, or they found it littered somewhere regularly on the school grounds. We also had COVID throughout this project, which made for some interesting changes. I mean, the things that we thought we would find as a result of that, which would be masks, because a lot of schools had mask mandates, we didn't really find. Other things that changed were some schools went to a school lunch program. So instead of children bringing outside food, the food was being provided by schools. And it was really interesting to measure what impact those external changes had on what we were finding and whether the behavior was changing. So whether the products were creating the behavior or if the behavior was there no matter what form things were happening in. Okay. So in 2022, each school group also had the opportunity to participate in a local field trip. So we actually walked the students to their local waterway, be it a stream, a beach, a pond, a lake, where their stormwater from their school site would go. And they actually tested the water using standard tools like clarity tubes and pH strips, dissolved oxygen tests and nitrate tests. So they were testing the water's health, especially things that will be influenced often by things beyond their control with their gross pollutants traps. But we also conducted site surveys to measure the litter that was present. So that was both visual observations, but we also would be sifting the sand if we were at a beach site or an estuary. And in flowing waterways, we deployed a microplastics trawl to see if we could catch anything that was floating downstream. And that's what's happening. Oops, oh, go back. That's what's happening in this picture here. That's our little microplastics trawl in a stream. Okay. And we also were lucky enough to get to go to the Auckland Zoo. So the Auckland Zoo team provided interactive sessions for our learners so they could learn all about sustainable approach to water use at the zoo and how they're using wetland technology to filter the water from the stream that runs through the zoo. So the zoo's water comes from a spring that isn't far from it, passes through the zoo, is used by the zoo within their habitats, and then it actually exits the zoo in the stream and goes to the coast, which isn't far away. It's not a particularly clean stream that they're working with, so it was really cool for the students to see like nature's technology being put to use in the zoo, and actually the water was leaving the zoo in better condition than it came in. It was a really compelling trip for a lot of the students. And there we go. These are our results. So over 2 years, we managed to trap more than 23,785 items across our school network of 15 traps. Of that, 1,785 were actual individual pieces of litter that were caught in the traps, but we also stopped an enormous amount of organic matter from entering the system and potentially causing clogging issues or flooding in heavy rain. And as anyone who has maybe, I don't know if you're up to speed on what's happened in New Zealand, but we've recently had quite a lot of flooding from some pretty heavy rain, and a lot of that was down to our stormwater network that isn't necessarily up to scratch, and in some cases not maintained and really, really blocked. In our standard protocol for the project, we considered organic matter to be litter because it doesn't belong in our drains or in our waterways. It actually belongs on the ground underneath the trees where those leaves fell from, and putting those nutrients back in the ground rather than into our waterways. For sustainable coastlines, our organic matter wasn't something that we measured and counted. It also was really overwhelming in some situations. Some traps are placed close enough to trees that the students were having to empty it every couple of weeks at certain times of the year because it would just be full of leaves, which presented its own challenges because the kids couldn't count every single leaf. So we had to come up with different ways of measuring it, which is also why we exclude it from our nationally presented data, because it's hard to be consistent, scientific about it. Okay. We found that 53% of it was plastics, and the majority of the plastic that we find is soft plastic food wrappers or fragments of what once was a food wrapper. It was really quite interesting because we don't have in schools, I suppose you're only going to have what's come mostly onto the school grounds in pockets and school bags and lunch boxes. So it will limit what we find, but that's the vast majority. We also found something we couldn't really count, which was lots of these soft plastic threads that have shed from the artificial turf surfaces, which have become increasingly popular on school court areas. And these are really, really tiny. If I make this bigger, it might be clearer. These really tiny little threads that they're often caught on the other waste that might be in the trap, like on the leaves, or in this example, it's actually caught on a seed pod. And if we didn't have that other organic matter in the trap, they probably would have flown right through the trap and into the waterways and out to our rivers and beaches. We also found lots of other random things, like socks and balls and scissors, but we also had other pollutants that were caught on debris like glitter and paint. So things, again, that would have passed through without us noticing had there not been something else in there to catch on. We also found things like cigarette butts and gum, which are expected in your roadside drains, but not expected on school grounds where they are banned. And we also noticed an uptick in those things following periods of COVID-19 lockdowns. So when the schools were closed, obviously other people were going onto the school grounds, and that's where some of that waste was coming from, which was a really interesting point for the students to think about who else uses their school when they're not there. So this slide shows a selection of student comments on their learning through the project. So how they felt about it, what they thought, and overall they were pretty astonished and sometimes a bit demoralized about what they found. They were surprised in a lot of cases at the, every time you empty the trap and there's 10 or 15 or 20 things in there, but when they looked at the collective across a year, let alone across 2 years, they were pretty astonished at how much was in there, given that was just one trap at their particular school. They all really loved connecting with their local waterways and going on that trip to see where the stuff from their school would end up. They all, on the next slide, it's what we should do, because that was our next big question. Now what, we've got all this data, and they all feel that we needed to keep doing what we were doing, but do more, and continuing to trap the litter and increasing people's awareness and education around the problems that we're facing with this issue. And the slideshow that I'm using is actually one that we sent out to any stakeholders, anybody who was remotely interested actually in the project that we were doing, to really get the message out there. And so the next section is actually like a little movie selection of photographs of the kids hard at work over the last couple of years and all the different things that they did. And at the very end, there is a tiny little video clip of students from one of the schools who made a little piece for their internal TV show that they have at the school. So every morning there's little news items about the school that students have played for each other. And so this was part of that. And in the version that we sent out to the schools of this slideshow, it actually has the students doing the talking rather than me. So I can make that available to anybody who'd be interested to see that afterwards. But for the next couple of minutes, you get to watch a pretty slideshow that kind of gives you a really good idea of what the kids got up to.
better than it usually does, though.
So we went around the school and then we found like lots of rubbish and papers. So we have chips, that's plaster. We have paper. We have tissues, spray, lolly bags, and those things so we need to spray. Bottles, paper, whatever this is called, lollies. See, look at that. That's bad. That's bad. But it's good we cleaned up the schools. Yeah, it's good and bad because people are putting their own shit away. And the good thing that we did was
Okay, and I think that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Monique. So inspired. We love it. It's amazing.
Hopefully, did you have audio there? Hopefully you could hear the jazzy music.
Yes, it was
Okay,
amazing.
okay.
Working super well. It was great to see how you use the technology to communicate it, to use as a tool for collecting data and education. So it's well done. Great video, great presentation. And we are a little bit behind of the schedule. So we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. So I will open here the mic. If you have questions for Monique or for Pei, you can raise your hands, you can unmute yourself, do what you feel comfortable. We will get a break at hour in 2 minutes, but we will stay here. If people want to stay for Q&A, they can stay. Otherwise, we will have in 10 minutes after past 10, we'll be back. But okay, let's see. I think we have some comments here. Susan, Monique, very impressive work. I'm curious, was there anything the students learned from their experience that stood out to you the most?
I think the biggest thing that it wasn't necessarily that stood out the most, but the most surprising was how few of them actually knew where their local waterways were. How few of them had actually, and I mean, they walked and they're reasonably small children. So they walked, 10, sometimes 20 minutes to their local waterway. And it really struck me how many of them, or some of them had walked right past the stream and not actually really looked at it ever. So the real connection that they made with their local area, and then that gave them a bit more ownership over what was happening. So it wasn't just that went into the trap and disappeared. They knew where it would end up. And that gave them a real push to protect it more. Yeah.
Amazing. We have other questions? For Pei or for Monique? Oh, Chelsea, you have a question? You can go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to type it into the chat, but I'll just ask it. This is a question for Pei. I'm just curious, given the question before about DIY traps and the fact that that's what you did, I'm curious if you have advice for other groups that are interested in a DIY trap and how they might go about doing that, and also thinking about how that might vary based on like the type of habitat or ecosystem that they want to create a trap for.
Thank you, Chelsea. Actually, we continue to get a lot of advice from different groups, such as fishermen or professional company owner from different perspective, from benefit perspective or from the local governments. So actually, the most common we have here is the ASA factor is too small to clean the marine debris. But the reason we built it as the size of a vehicle is because the fishing port in Taiwan is barely not very huge. So while you build too big, it's hard to to go through in the fishing port. So a lot of advantage have been bring up, but yeah. So now we are in experiment most in fishing port, but in the coming future, we are looking forward to go into the lake and river. So that it's our breakthrough in a very very near future. So we will actually, but well, I will bring the other comment on these questions. We don't know if everyone can see, have read a review paper from last year. There are a paper to give the evaluation of the different marine trap in the world. I believe it's approximately around 40. So as a fighter, we identify as a lower efficiency and cleanest and high speed and high cost, but user friendly. So based on that, a lot of advantage we take around. So we will keep in mind and to get improved. Hope I answer the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Monique, we have a question for you. Have you any lesson plan for kids, students between 7 to 12 with simple English that maybe as an example for schools in Indonesia?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's our target. Well, age group that we're working with for this is more 9 to 14, but yeah, we definitely would be able to either adapt something or send something to you that could easily be adapted.
Do you have in your website?
No, you'd have to communicate with me. Yeah, and I could get it out to you. Yeah.
Okay, so excellent. So you can, Monique, maybe later you can put your information.
Put my email address up. Yeah.
Email, yeah, then we can connect with you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Any other questions before we go for break? I have many questions, but I don't want to. Chelsea, go ahead.
I don't have to ask them either if others do, but
okay, go.
I have a question for Monique. One of the things we think about in our own school programs is whether what we teach kids translates to adults, and we haven't measured that at all, like their parents. We haven't measured that, and I'm curious, have you looked at that at all in terms of how your programs are affecting parents and adults?
Yeah. Well, with the Tread Lightly caravan, we actually had a real policy of when we're trying to promote change, it had to be stuff that kids could do themselves. So they didn't have to rely on the adults in their lives to complete things. They had that agency within themselves to make something happen and see a change. So we kind of carried that over to everything. But that said, we do host parent and teacher workshops after school or sort of around school pickup time at schools where the caravans are. With the Stormwater Sleuths project, the biggest change, well, the biggest impact we had was we got a lot of parent helpers to come along on our field trips. And that was another really big eye-opener for them, because again, a lot of them hadn't explored their local waterways and they got to really understand what their students were doing. And a lot of messaging from parents coming back through. We don't have formal measurement for their change in behavior the way that we do on the school grounds. But I would also like to think that when we're seeing less litter happening at school, it is also a reflection of less litterable things appearing in their lunchboxes. So if they're not bringing it to school, then they haven't got it to drop. And so I'm hoping that message is pushing back through that way to the parents. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but measuring the behavior change at home is so much harder than measuring it at school where the students are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I saw one study, I think it was about climate change, where they surveyed the parents, and just because the kids were telling their parents about it, the parents had learned something more, which I thought was neat too. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Pei, I have a very quick question. I did understand. You said that the government, they hire people to collect, to clean the water with traditional tools. What type of traditional tools do they use? It's like a sieve?
It's basically the fishing net. It's like the very long, with a long bamboo to tie down.
Okay. So they collect bigger litter.
Yes.
Macro. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. If we don't have more questions? We'll be back in 4 minutes. Is that correct? Okay, so thank you so much, Pei and Monique. It was amazing. We love it, your both presentation, the work you are doing. So hopefully we can work together in the future. So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so see you all in 4 minutes.
Okay. We'll just wait a couple more minutes for everyone to come back. Thank you, Chelsea, for letting people know we were on a break.
Saw someone pop in from the EPA.
Yeah, that's good. So everyone should be returning back in the next minute or so. So just say hi or give us a wave when you come back, so we know that we've got people back in the room, and then we'll carry on. Okay, hi everyone. Okay, to keep us on time, I am going to get started. I will just make sure that Rafaela is back. She is there. Hi, Rafa.
I'm here.
Okay. Welcome to everyone who's just joined as well. So we're just about to get into our second half of the workshop today. So our next presenter is Rafaela Gutierrez. So Rafa is one of the co-founders of the University of Toronto Trash Team, and she's also program lead of social science and educational programs. She oversees the creation and the delivery of our waste literacy school programs, and she's also involved with a lot of our solutions-based research. She'll be sharing with us today some of the lessons we've learned so far through tracking trash and things to consider for tracking trash success. So over to you, Rafa.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Let's see. Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Recipe for Success section. I'm Rafaela, and I haven't introduced myself before, but I am co-founder of the University of Toronto Trash Team, and I'm leading our educational program and also helping with the solution-based research program, where, among other things, we create and test methodology to collect data from trash trap device. So you want a trash trap. To start here, we have outlined a recipe for you all to follow and adjust based on your taste and what your kitchen can handle. For those of you who are avid bakers, you know that you have to follow the recipe to a T for the final products to come out perfectly. But here, we are just providing you with some rough guidelines to have a successful trash trapping project and giving you all the opportunity to learn from some of our mistakes and make note of some aspects we didn't quite considering before. So what do you need for a trash trapping project? You need a trash trap device, a bottle of water to put it in, a team of as passionate as you are, funding, and a big bucket of motivation and optimism. Next, throughout all the presentation, we will go through the steps on how to utilize your ingredients for a successful trash trapping project, and we will share the project's checklist as well. If you are here at our workshop, it's mostly likely you know you have a trash problem in your area. You take walks along the lake, coast, or river and see there is a lot of trashing accumulating. This may well be a hotspot and a great place to put a trash trap device, but there is something else to consider prior to just putting it in the first place. the first place you see where the garbage ended up. You should, and one of the things you should start with is you should assess your watershed. This will allow you to gain an understanding of where the litter is coming from, what the sources are, and the types of plastic waste or litter are you most commonly seeing. You must first identify this to optimize the location for your trash capture device to capture and remove it from your waterways. Depending on your region, there might be multiple sources, whether it's a river or a creek, or it might be due to high population density on that water body, in which you will have to emphasize the community outreach aspect in your trash trapping project to encourage behavior change. Within your watershed, there will be sources, hotspots, transports, and sink. So the first thing that we want to share here is source points are always a priority to place a trash trap device, as they will catch and remove the litter before it further pollutes the watershed. Sites of plastic transport are usually clear pathways of where plastic moves from one point to another. Rivers, for example, rivers are a great example of this. Hotspots are where the trash tends to accumulate at large rates, but it's not its final destination. So if left untouched, it will continue to travel through the watershed after a big storm or due to current and winds, for example. Sinks are when it's the end point for litter, and where it often gets accumulated and doesn't move locations easily. Each of these possible locations of plastics we just discussed often overlap, and sites of transport can be hotspots, and hotspot can also be sinks. These general definitions that we are using here are just to help you understand the fate of plastic pollution and to understand when placing a trash trap device in an area in your region, tackling any and each of these will still make an impact. You also need to understand what type of conditions you have in your water body. Is there a lot of aquatic vegetation, for example? What are the wind and water currents like? Taking note of the seasons in your region is really important. For example, does your water body become frozen over? Here in Canada, we have this situation. This will help you think about what device may be more feasible for you. Another important question to note is, does your water body have the infrastructure for trash trap device? If so, what type of trash can your water body hold? For example, we, the UFT trash team, we want to place a Mr. Trash Well in our harborfront. Mr. Trash Well is a big technology with googly eyes from Baltimore in US. But due to all the constructions that's being done near a large source point of litter to the harbor, it was not possible for us in that moment. So to understand these different sites and conditions in your area, you can try and Google local NGOs in your area to see if they have published a watershed assessment or reported certain overflows of litter from a certain point. You can look for watershed assessment model for your region, and this might be provided by your local government to help you understand water flows in your watershed, and can also help you identify potential source points, hotspots, transports, and sinks. Researchers are also working hard and developing models to predict surface transport of plastic pollution to identify where they are accumulated the most, given the wind and current patterns. But until that, it's more widely available, and if there is no open data available to you from local volunteer groups or a watershed assessment tool, we have developed an easy method to determine where to place your device, your trash trap, and get the most bang for your buck. And this method we call the visual audit. And what is the visual audit? You will visually observe the leader present in a water body by recording the types and amount of leader you see in your local water body. You can conduct this a few times throughout the year or season to understand how leader accumulates and change depends on the season or after a rainfall, for example. This will also help inform you on the type of device you should be considering. Should it be mobile or stationary? This protocol can be found on our website and included in your research package given after the workshop. And this also, this method is really fun, actually, because you will walk around your own watersheds and you will see where things are accumulating. So it's a good way to get connected with your community as well. So next, create your dream team. This is really, really important. From earlier presentations, I think Chelsea mentioned it a little bit, how engaging with multiple different stakeholders and how we can lead a successful project, how can this be so important. So how do you create your own dream team? First, you want to identify your local stakeholders in your area, in your region. And this might be a marina, local government, volunteer cleanup groups, NGOs, business along the water, fishermen, or any other avid waterway users or any community that is involved in love waters. As there are many economic and social implications with plastic pollution, ensure to sell the benefits of the trash trap device, as it will help restore the water body to what it once was, and it's a long-term solution. So try to sell the benefits of collecting trash in your collected debris in your area. As you begin to bring together all the local stakeholders in this project, make it reach as many people as possible, and help it grow, help create a community, help create a group. In your trash trapping project, ensure everyone feels they have a significant part in the initiative, and you have enough stakeholders motivated to collaborate in this project, as there are many, many roles to play. The first is the operator. Who knows how the device functions? Who can fix it when something goes wrong? And unfortunately, things go wrong and machines break. So who has the machinery to remove and deploy the trash capture device if needed be? Who can help assess the best points of placement and help identify technical issues? Next is who will maintain the technology. Those who maintain it will be cleaning it out daily or as often as the debris needs to be removed, and maintain it and they will ensure that everything is functioning properly. Next, you need your waste characterization team. Who will collect the daily data using our simple data protocol, or who will collect the data using our detailed protocol, which requires a quantification and characterization of the leader at least 5 to 10 times a season or a year? Who will comply with the data to send it to the trash trapping network? And lastly, identify who will work on communicating the project to your local community and organize outreach events or any other opportunities around the device. Who will help create signage, tell the story to your local community about this project? So all these questions, all the roles and responsibility you have to have in mind when you decide to have a trash trapping project. And then once you complete your watershed assessment and create your dream team, pick the device together. What seems to be the best device for you or for your group? Think about the environment you're in. Do you get snow and ice? What types of aquatic organic materials is present in your area? What's the weather like in your area? These are important considerations for maintenance and storage of your trap. Once you pick the trap you think is the best, and you have an idea of where you want to place the device in your region, do you have the capacity to operate it? Does it need an external energy source? Can you provide this? Do you have a reliable form of labor to maintain the device over time? Based on the capabilities of your team, would you benefit more from a manual or autonomous device? Devices with larger holding capacity require less frequent collection, whereas smaller devices require more attention and collections depend on how polluted the area is. It's important to remember the fit for purpose statement. We want to emphasize that having a trash trap device, no matter the size, will still make a measurable difference. So do it. And if you don't know where to start to look, as Hannah mentioned before, we have created a device directory with information from several trash trap devices, and we can share with you all. It's in our website, and we will share in the document after the workshop. So don't worry, there is you can look at that and doesn't need to get super confused. Now you have your team and ideal device. It's time to think about funding. What can you and your team afford? Many of the cheaper devices are valued around $10,000, but this does not include maintenance or operational costs. Does someone in your team have machinery if required to deploy and retrieve the trash trap device? Put your hands all together to try and identify fund sources and plan for long-term maintenance. This is really also a very important step. Put your hands together, put your heads together at the beginning, see how you all can work together to get some funding. And if there is little to no funding, but you have volunteers, a lot of volunteers available, you and your team could consider manual debris collection efforts and use a low-cost device. As examples of these include booms, litter traps, or even a do-it-yourself trash trap device, as we saw here before. So get creative, and it is possible. And then, lastly, ensure that you fully utilize your device. It's important to recognize that this is not only a technology that removes litter, but it can be used as a research tool and act as a centerpiece for education and outreach to engage your local community in a very collaborative initiative, as we saw with our presentation before. By engaging the public, you can bring awareness to solutions that individuals can have starting at home and educate them on the common sources and types of plastic that litters our waterways. Studies have shown that when outreach is partnered with innovation in waste management, for example, the plastic waste reduction is increased more versus when it's just innovation with no outreach. So again, get creative, put people together, spread the word, try to connect with more people around you and engage with them. It will be, your technology can be a center of a very amazing educational campaign. This recipe has been created from many different attempts, and it's still going to need tweaks and adjusting throughout the years. We are learning every day, every month. We are learning new things about trash trapping technologies and how to incorporate everyone and work with a bigger group. And so we are adjusting throughout the years as we discover new ingredients needs to make this as successful as possible with your help. However, there are some things we realize it and we learn it, we need to add it, and we want to share here with you all. So maintaining roles and responsibilities. So this is really fundamental. in a project, we learned that it's extremely important that everyone have their set roles and takes responsibilities for what they assign, or else the project is not as effective as intended. Make sure you maintain relationships within your team so that everyone is held accountable for their part. Establishing these roles will make the process much smoother in the end, and the results will be much better, and everybody will be accomplished at what we achieved. Next is identify and recognize your native vegetation. We found that vegetation can damage our trash trap device very easily if left unmaintained for a long period of time. And due to some local vegetations like pine trees here, for example, as their needles were very small enough to breach the mesh, causing damage to the pump. So we had some problems like this. So placing the device far from these trees would help avoid this issue, for example. Lastly, we found in the fall, one of the years in the fall, we had some dead fish accumulating in the bins. And if this occurs, keep an eye in the area. In our case, we realized it was unlikely our device caused this, as the fish can outswim the currents that the pump creates because the pump was very slow. So we thought that it was most likely due to poor water quality. So this may not be the case for other devices. So it's really important to note, if this occurs more than once, you may consider moving your device to another area to avoid an impact to aquatic ecosystems or aquatic organisms, because the last thing that we want, we are there to to protect the environment, and we don't want to hurt any wildlife. So those are the main lessons learned that we had in the past years, 4 years, and I think that's it. So this is the recipe to create a successful trapping trash project. So thanks so much for your time. So now I actually want to open the floor to all of you, and I want to hear what are some of your lessons learned that you want to share with us. Yeah, we'll stop with sharing my slides.
Thank you, Rafa. Yeah, so we have a few minutes now. We have about 8 minutes for any questions for Rafaela, or if you also, as Rafa mentioned, if you have any lessons learned from any of your projects, then please, the floor is yours to share them with the group and talk about them. We have no questions as of yet, but Pei just said, thank you for sharing the ITTN's incredible experiment. I think Pei has a question, so Pei, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask Rafa.
Yes, thank you, Hannah, and thank you so much for experiment sharing, especially when you talk about the funding part. As a growing NGO, the funding is really the challenge for us. And we found out due to our people, our staff is not many, and from more and more companies, they notice such the marine debris issue. They want to improve their ESG in our group, but however, every different company, they have a different strategy. So even though they want to funding you, as a small group, you need to make the strategy with a different company. Sometimes will be really complicated, and our time will be stuck in the different company and group. So the funding issue will be have more discussion, and I especially thank you for sharing this part. So, yeah, it's really nice presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your experience. Yes, funding is always I think it's the trickiest part, and it's hard for us to get one funding only. So we have to get different groups with different pockets, and small here, small there, and then we have a sum that's enough, and we have a lot of volunteers as well. But it's not an easy task to get funding for everything that we needed to run and keep running the project for many years.
Definitely. Thanks, Pei, for your question. Yeah, I guess one thing that there's one option of trying to go for the lower cost technology, but there's always costs associated with running it, energy requirements, people. So, yeah.
And yes, and this is really important because we get excited, and sometimes it's easier to get the money to fund the technology, but then to fund who is collecting the data, who is work on the maintenance of the trash trap device, and then do the communications and do that's the hardest part to get funding, I think.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Rafa while we have a few minutes? We have 5 minutes left. Or anyone else who'd like to share?
And I just want to share like how successful, so how a technology can really be a centerpiece of education and communication and collected data. So that's what we are doing here. And we saw with the Monique example in a school, they don't have like a systematic like us collecting data every day, but they are using this as a centerpiece for education as well. And they are collecting data. So it's amazing. So you can use the technology for so many purposes.
Definitely. And we have in our, after the break, we've got our final session in the workshop where we'll be digging into everything Rafa covered in more detail. So there'll be a whole presentation and group discussion about the communications and education side of things, and also funding and stakeholders, and then data collection as well. So do stick around for that if you're interested in chatting about that more. We have a question from Monique for you, Rafa, which is, do you have
Yes.
any media communication strategies? But it is next up. But Rafa, you can give a little bit of insight if you like.
Yes, we do. We do a lot of different we use a lot of social media, depending on the target group. We have all the social aspects, and Susan will talk more. And we also have like reports when we want to talk to policy or decision makers. We also have some strategies, and but it's all about social media and like Twitter and Instagram and those kind of things. But we also communicate in locally with groups and journals or news magazines and in different scenarios. But we will have a session all about this in more detail. So stay tuned.
Keep everyone in suspense. Okay, thank you, Rafa.
No problem.
Okay. We will stick around. If anyone has any other questions, we'll stick around for another 3 minutes. But if not, then feel free to go for our next break. So we're going to have a slightly longer break now. It'll be 30 minutes. So we'll have everyone back at 10 past the hour. And when we come back, we'll have a bit of an introduction to what's coming up from Chelsea. And then we will be going into our different group sessions for digging into all those details about those 3 different topics. So if anyone wants to go for their break now, please do. We'll stick around for a couple more minutes in case anyone has any final questions. But thank you, Rafa, again for your great presentation.
Oh, thank you. I just want to, someone put in a note in the chat that thank you for the visual audit method. I just want to remind you that is in our partners' website, and probably in ours as well. And I think we will share afterwards the document with all the information. A visual audit will be there as well.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll go for break. So we'll see everyone at 10 past when we come back. But thank you again, Rafa.
Okay, I think we're right about 10 after. So if people are back, you can go ahead and give a thumbs up or a wave or give us a hi in the chat. We'll know people are back. We will go ahead and get started. And so this is our final, the final session before Hannah gives kind of like the final goodbye. But it's a bit longer of a session and we call it the ingredients. And so the point of this section is basically to go over all of the ingredients that it takes sort of to have what we think it takes to have a trash trapping program. So the session is called So You Want to Trap Trash. And the idea is that we'll talk about the different ingredients. So I'll walk you through what we're going to go over and then we'll go ahead and get started. So there'll be 3 separate half-an-hour sessions and they'll be back to back with time for Q&A after. The first one's going to be all about ownership and operations. So in this one, Hannah and I are going to talk about some of the nitty-gritty to owning a trap, daily maintenance, that type of thing. Then after that, we'll have a session about data collection and research, and this will be led by Sarah Kolar and Britta Baechler from Ocean Conservancy, and then Rafaela Gutierrez, who you've met before. She gave an earlier session today. Then finally, there'll be a session on outreach and communication. And so this will be led by Susan Deppertzeni from the U of T trash team and Robyn Stegman and Madeline Black from Ocean Conservancy. Each one will be, as I said, a half an hour with some time for Q&A after, and then we'll go ahead and do a wrap up. So the idea here, again, like I said, is really to give kind of the ingredients or what we see as the ingredients to a successful trash trapping program, which includes the ownership and operation, but also the data collection and the outreach. So I think we will go ahead and get started. So I will stop sharing my screen, and then I think Hannah is going to share her screen and go through the first session.
Yeah, sure, we can get going. Okay, bear with me. My mouse is doing a weird thing. It's just staring off the screen. Okay, I got it. Okay. So for the first session in the ingredient section, Chelsea and I will be talking you guys through ownership and operation. So we both introduced ourselves briefly. Again, as a reminder, my name is Hannah Frond, and I coordinate the International Trash Trap Network. So I can be your point of call for any questions or further information after this workshop. And Chelsea, do you want to just briefly remind everyone who you are one more time?
Sure thing. So my name is Chelsea Rochman, and I am with the U of T trash team, and I'm the head of operations and the program lead for scientific programming and application.
Okay. So during this session, Chelsea and I are going to share some of our practical experiences and things to consider for ownership and operation of trash traps. So we'll discuss our experiences in respect to the installation, operation, long-term thoughts and considerations, and things to consider for long and short-term success when using these technologies. So to get us started, we've mentioned Dream Team a couple of times now, but we're just going to start off with this as a starting point. So here's a list of some of the stakeholders that's been mentioned so far today that might need to be involved in a trash trapping project. So this includes NGOs, which I know a few of you are from NGOs today, and environmental organizations, but also other considerations like businesses, the general public, waterway users, so fishermen, as Pei mentioned earlier, boat operators, and also device manufacturers can also be someone that you work with to get your trap in the water and to find you a dream team as well. So we'll mention a few of these throughout, but just something to mention, there's lots of options for people who you can work with for this. So the first step in trash trap installation is understanding where you're installing it. And so Rafaela mentioned our visual audit that we've developed. So this is all the step-by-step process for doing this, Rafa went through, but we also have this in a resource called our project checklist, which we have shared in our resource package, and we'll share with you again after the workshop. So this allows you to go step by step, tick off all the checkpoints, and make sure that you've covered each step and thought about each aspect of your project right at the very start. So to run over this again briefly, when you use the visual audit protocol, it allows you to compare data across sites in your local area to identify the sites that will give you the most bang for your buck for cleanup. So identify where's the best place to put your device, where are you going to collect the most trash, where are you going to have the least impact on wildlife and biota. So once you've decided on your location for your trap, it's time to think about who you might involve. So I mentioned this again, but it really is important to think about involving those people from the very start. So considering who needs to access the waterway, who needs to have access to the trap, who's going to be the one who will be emptying the device, all those sorts of things. Are there any tourism organizations you might want to get involved? And you might even need not only their input, but also their agreement or even permission for installation. We've had experience in before, so that's definitely something to consider. Also, some of these organizations not only will be able to help out with the project, but they also might have local expertise or connections. So a good example of this is when you're considering the local wildlife and biota that might be using the waterway or the coastal area nearby your trap. These certain organizations in your local area might have the right knowledge and guidance on any sort of impacts that you might have that might not be obviously visible, and it's always great to consult with these groups prior to installation. Ideally, if you have a location in mind and a device in mind, then you can go to them and say, this is what we plan to do, what do you think? And they can give you their expert opinion on that. So that's a good example of how you can use people with local expertise or connections. Second is installation. So after you've got your location, your device, your dream team, and once everyone's involved, you need both short and long-term partners. So first, you have to have someone to purchase the device. We've mentioned cost can be a factor, but once you've secured that, you need to have a plan for installation. So installation can be quite a logistically complicated thing to do. Sometimes your devices can be really large and it takes a few days, but it's just important to think about who needs to be there on the day. Do you need any materials for installation at the site? How long do you expect it to take? Do you need to clear the area for public access on the day that it's being installed? Say, for example, if you need to have a road to access or a pathway that needs to be cleared for people to get in and out of the area to bring materials. Each site is unique, and so it might require different considerations if, for example, you've got some people might install multiple devices installed along a certain area of waterfront or along a river. And so just considering what might be different at each of those locations is also useful. And so getting the device set up well in the first instance will set you up for successful operations thereafter. So again, really important to think about these things at the very, very start. Okay. I think this is my last slide, and I'm going to hand over to you, Chelsea. Is that right? Or is it you now?
You can go ahead, either way.
Okay, so once your device is installed and you have it all working properly, it's time to step into your plan for long-term maintenance and operations. So often groups will choose to install their own device in a public location for some of the reasons that we mentioned earlier, so for education and outreach. But this can lead to further considerations about who has access to the site or the trap, if there are any threats of vandalism or theft. We've had this discussed in previous workshops. And also how easy is it for people to access the device in the water? So not only keeping people away from it, but also can the people who need to access it reach it easily? And do they have the right equipment, logistically and safety-wise, to do so? One final thing to note is getting to know the product in practice. So in addition to ensuring installation goes smoothly, it's great to work with your long-term maintenance partners to check in periodically on the device in action once it's installed. So for example, in the first few days or weeks afterwards, have someone dedicated to go in and just check it's functioning right, check if there are any mechanical issues that need fixing, if there's organic matter getting trapped in the device that might impair its function, all those sorts of things. And then also think of solutions, long-term solutions, if there is a chance of those things happening that you notice in the first few days or weeks. So one positive thing to note here is that we hope through the network, I mentioned this earlier, but we hope that groups can connect with each other, and we can also connect people to each other to troubleshoot with any issues that you have with your trap. So we can work together to get insight from others who might have experienced similar issues. And so we hope that everyone can kind of help each other out and offer advice as we grow and as we have more partners within the region. Okay, Chelsea, over to you.
Okay. So I'll take over from here. And one thing I'll say before I move on to the data collection, outreach, and education is just share, I guess, a little bit of our own experience with the parts that Hannah talked about before, which is kind of the ownership and operation in terms of creating your team and who does the pre-install, the install, and the maintenance and operations. So for us, we work really closely with Ports Toronto, who owns the marinas and runs the marinas basically in the city. They own our traps that are in the water. And then our traps that are on land are actually owned by the city of Toronto. So we don't own any of the traps that we use. We also don't maintain them. So if they are broken, then that's on Ports or the city to fix them. We do operate them daily, meaning we're the ones that empty them. And it's really important, I think, to figure out who's going to empty them and at what schedule you need to empty them on. So if you have basically a situation where you get a trap and that's amazing and it's wonderful to have it, but you don't have someone to regularly empty it, you may as well not have a trap. So it's really important, I think, to get, as Hannah said, that dream team where you have the people who will own it and operate it and fix it. And then the people maybe different who empty it and do the data collection. So what I'm going to talk about from here is some of the parts of the trash trapping program that we do here in Toronto, which is emptying the trap, the data collection, and the outreach and education. So the first thing is having people who are going to agree to empty them regularly. And then in an ideal world, every time they're emptied, some data is collected. So in our case, we do a simple data collection daily, basically, where you simply weigh the amount of debris that you capture. So you get some idea of what you divert. And then we do the detailed data collection on each trap anywhere from 5 to 20 times a season, just depending on how much time we have. That's where we figure out the types of debris that we're finding. To have effective data collection, it's important to have this, we call it a waste characterization partner. And so for Ports Toronto, we are essentially their waste characterization partner. We use these standard data collection protocols that we've established and brought to the International Trash Trap Network. When you join the network, you don't have to follow our protocol to a T, but we do ask that you report the data in the same units that we require for the app. So as long as the data can all be synthesized together, it's okay if the way that you collect the data slightly varies. We understand that will happen and that certain protocols are better for certain traps. And our goal is to help people create the protocols that can be harmonized to our data collection if they don't have that protocol yet. And the ones we have don't already fit theirs. And then you also want to make sure you have a plan to communicate the data for research, for policy, and for education. So every year we communicate how much debris we remove and what we remove, and we communicate it through social media. We communicate it as a report on our website. We make a policy brief that we send to local stakeholders, city councilors, people in the region who might benefit from the information. And then, of course, we share it within the International Trash Trap Network, so it can be part of the global solution. So figuring out kind of all the pieces on this slide here in terms of emptying the trap and the data collection and how that will be used for education and outreach is really important. Hannah, if you can go to the next slide. And this is, the next slide is waste disposal. So This will vary depending on where you are and also the type of trap you have. So for sea bins and litter traps, the amount that's in there isn't very hard to throw away in a normal dumpster in the city. For things that you can recycle, it's good to think about whether your project can have circularity. So can you sort and actually put some materials in the recycle bin? Are they clean enough and uncontaminated? But for larger traps, you might have a situation where you need your own waste management system for it. So for example, the trash wheels have their own large dumpster and they work with the city. And the city, I think, pays the tipping fees and they're able to get their waste taken away. We are about to have this experience as we get a litter getter in a river where we will also have a lot more debris. In the city of Toronto, Solid Waste has agreed to work with us to give us extra dumpsters and do extra collection. So this is another really important piece. So there's a bit more than just owning the trap. And finally is costs. So Hannah, if you can go to the last slide before discussion, is the actual amount of money that you spend, which includes both time and equipment. So the purchase of the actual trap, and I think someone mentioned before that some of them are quite pricey. So, but there are lots that are affordable. So we don't have any, like the sea bins and the litter traps, I think are really affordable and efficient traps to use. Then of course there you can also make your own. The installation sometimes comes at a cost. It depends. For example, for the litter getter, we will need to put posts in the ground. So sometimes the installation comes at a cost. The maintenance, I think, is really important. So if you put a trap in, you want to make sure you also have the people power that can empty it and take care of it. There may be some consumables. We find that there aren't many, but for emptying, at least we have garbage bags and data sheets and things like that. But for the most part, not too many consumables on our end. The waste disposal can cost money. It depends. The city has worked with us. We've never spent money on this, but it's possible that some groups may have to. And then the waste collection and characterization can cost money. And of course, sometimes people do this with school groups or they have volunteers, but there is a time associated with the waste collection and characterization that's important to think about. So if you're writing a grant, for example, for a trash trapping program, these are all of the things to think about. But altogether, I would say in the city of Toronto, what we have found is that, the cost hasn't been too high for the reward that we do get, which is great. I think that is actually the last slide. And so now, before we go to the next group, we'll take any questions about ownership and operation and or your own kind of stories and feedback based on your own experiences.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone who already has a trap. Let us know how you arranged your waste characterization partner, for example, or was there anything that was unforeseen when you installed the device that you found out later? All those things would be great to hear.
If anyone has questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand, or as before, you can type them in the chat. And I think Hannah also put our website in there for where to find our protocols and other information. And that includes the visual audit. Go ahead and wait a second. And if we don't have questions, that's okay. We'll move on to the next one, which is outreach and education or data collection. Thank you, Monique. Okay, Monique says, we set up an MOU with each school we installed a trap at, which is private property, stating that they were responsible for emptying it, not us. That's a great point. Where we have traps right now at industry, we set up an MOU where we empty it for 6 months and then it's theirs. And then it's theirs to empty. So that's really important. And Monique adds, this protects us from risks if the trap is not emptied during school holidays, etc. if there is a flood, right? So sometimes when a trap isn't empty, sometimes it can be as simple as the trap breaks, which isn't great. But sometimes it can be something in Monique's case here mentioning like if there's a flood.
I can also add to that, I guess, in that I've spoken to a couple of groups where they initially might have had a certain selection of groups or organizations involved in trap maintenance or a certain waste characterization partner, that things change, capacity might change, staffing might change, volunteer numbers might change, as we've seen in the past with things in the world happening. So one option that I've spoken to some groups about is having an MOU, but also revisiting that annually or every 6 months at a certain time point, just to make sure everyone's still happy with their roles, and visit any issues anyone's having and think about possibly changing things if they're not working as efficiently as they could do, or if everyone's not 100% happy with or able to do their role.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments?
I think so.
Okay, and I think we'll go into the next group, and I can see that Britta and Sarah and Rafaela are ready with their cameras on.
All right. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yep. Yes, perfect. Okay, let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us and stay here all the way with this workshop. We appreciate. So in this section, we are going to talk in more detail the importance of data collection. But first, we want to get to know each other. So I don't need to introduce myself. I'm Rafaela, co-founder of the UFT Trash team, and I'm here with Britta and Sarah, so they can introduce themselves. Britta?
Sure. Hi, Britta Baechler with Ocean Conservancy. I live in Portland, Oregon in the United States, and I get to deal with lots of science and research around plastics, which is a blast. Over to Sarah.
Thanks, Britta. Thanks, Rafaela. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Weller. I apologize. I have not updated our slide. It looks like I need to do that. Recently married, but you can still email that email and you'll reach me either way. So no worries there. I'm the senior manager for the International Coastal Cleanup on Ocean Conservancy's Trash Free Seas team. So it's wonderful to see some familiar ICC names in the bunch today, and looking forward to making more connections with you all.
All right. I can share this slide, Britta. Floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So in this session we're at today, we will touch on kind of why and how collecting harmonized data is really important, paramount, and how we can use the protocols and applications to collect data. So next slide, please, Rafa. Okay, so as we all have talked about today, trash capture devices serve not only to collect debris, but also to collect data. These data can be used for scientific purposes to support evidence-based policies and research. The data can and also have been pivotal in informing policies and creating plastic prevention laws and regulations around the world, actually. And last, these data translate really well into education and outreach opportunities and can help a lot with raising awareness in not just local communities, but much more broadly too. The data can be used to inspire kind of our imaginations or those that are less familiar with trash and debris in the environment, and can help push for local solutions to the plastic pollution problem in our communities, spread around the world. Next slide, please. So we've learned a lot today about trash capture devices. Again, this session is specifically diving into how these devices are critically important scientific tools. So trash capture devices, as we all know, collect debris, and the way we collect data on what we catch in our traps can be done in a standardized way. Our traps can be used to quantify and characterize the actual amount of debris we capture in terms of weight, and the categories in terms of types of items that are captured and ultimately diverted from the environment. We can also learn more about not only what's captured in the devices, but also how effective these are at capturing different sizes of debris, from the really small microplastics you might find in a litter trap to those pre-production pellets, et cetera, all the way up to the large like macroplastics, bags, tires, maybe even a plastic barrel. And this makes trash traps really powerful scientific tools that help us all understand and really think about likely sources of these plastic contamination at different scales. Next slide, please, Rafa. So the University of Toronto team has really extensively researched the trash trapping devices they've used in the Toronto Harbor. And that's to ensure that subsampling of what's collected in these traps is a reliable way to estimate total catch weight and the total count of debris items that are captured. Because some of these traps can capture, as someone was talking about earlier, thousands and thousands of different types of not only trash, but also organic debris. Subsampling can be an effective way to save time while still accurately characterizing and collecting data on what debris is captured there. And Rafa will talk a little more about this later. Next slide, please. In terms of policies and how we can inform important laws and regulations, these have been on the agendas of all of our collective governments actually in recent years. Where I am in the United States, certain individual states and even counties, which are kind of like small states within states, and individual cities have all passed legislation limiting either the sale or distribution of certain single-use plastic items like the ones you see on the screen. We also just passed legislation in Florida, which is a warm weather state in the southeastern US, which bans cigarette smoking in public beaches because we have found that cigarette butts are really frequently encountered on beaches and caught in trash traps there. In Canada, where other colleagues are calling from, the federal government announced a ban on different types of single-use plastics effective, I think it was last year, maybe the year before. And these are possible because, you know, decision makers want to be sure that the policies that they push for and spend time lobbying for are backed by robust data and numbers. And as such, for many of these policies, cleanup data are used to inform those important decisions. So the ITTN will provide yet another strong data set from which these new policies in the future might be born. Next slide, please, Rafa. This slide here quickly just shows a list of policies where data collected during the International Coastal Cleanup have been foundational in helping inspire and pass plastic reduction policies here in the US. So this is a short list. If we were to go country by country with every participant here, it would be so much longer. But these are just some examples. Next slide, please, Rafa. And the last topic I wanted to touch on is the communication value of all of our trash trapping devices. We've heard about that today as well. And about the ITTN, since we're basically a big family of trash trappers. Data collected from these traps can be used really effectively to engage with the public through lots of different channels. That can be through social media, which can have a global reach, as many of you have likely seen. That can be infographics generated from your device's data. It can be really hyper-local educational programming. And as we talked about, ITTN now has some super valuable resources you're free to use and adapt to your area. So on this slide are a couple pictures of examples how the U of T trash team have used trash trapping devices for comms communication purposes. I'll just briefly talk about the picture on the left. That's an image that went viral on Twitter. It was Rafa, who you heard a bit from today already, was out in the field doing a waste characterization from one of their trash trapping devices when she found this degraded takeout coffee cup from like a fast food restaurant. And the picture confirms that there really is a plastic liner inside of the paper coffee cup, which was actually news to many people. So just physically seeing that picture helped a lot of folks, you know, open up dialogue about this topic, about the recyclability and sustainability of this particular packaging and single-use plastics in general. So that's one way that social media can be used as an effective tool related to trash traps. And one more thing I'll say, you know, the data we collect can be displayed in many forms and engage the public in lots of different ways. So all of our trash trapping devices and the data we collect have lots of benefits. They allow us to not only quantitatively measure our collective impact, but also allow us many different opportunities, whether those are sharing those images on social media, whether we're getting those cool infographics that we're putting on our websites or on, you know, public posters or flyers. But they all help create a really powerful, harmonized, science-based message. And that is that trash is a big problem and that trash trapping devices are a really important part of the solution. Next slide, please. That will be passed over to you, Rafa. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Britta. It was great. So now that you all have an understanding of why it's so important to utilize your device for data collection, let's go through and see how to do it. First off, there are two protocols that we have created to collect the data. I think Chelsea already mentioned. The first is the simple data protocol, which is ideally would be carried out by those who maintain your trash trap device, as this is meant to be carried out at least once a day. Of course, depends on the size of your technology, and is intended for a device that needs to be emptied out daily or very often. As Britta mentioned before, this data will be used to extrapolate and determine how much plastic we collect versus the rest of the natural debris or other contents collected by your trash trap device. For this protocol, all you need is your PPE gear, a scale, like a luggage scale, and our data trapper app, which I will go through in a second. And then the second protocol is our detailed data protocol. This is intended for your designed waste characterization partner, who will go and do a deep dive into the debris and quantify and categorize the different litter caught in your trap. That's what we do here. Here you do not use the data trapper app, but instead use a paper data sheet, which I will show you in a few slides. In the future, very soon, we will have an app for everything. Okay, so starting with the simple data protocol. You simply remove the debris from your trash capture device, as you can see the first picture, and weight the content, use a luggage scale. Then you can record this weight into the data trapper and then throw away your debris into the garbage. This should take no more than 10 minutes, depend on your device. And of course, it's good to let you know, we are throwing away our even natural debris because here in Toronto specifically, we have a lot of invasive species. So it's we connect with the people here, and they said, with the authorities, and they said it's better if we throw away in the garbage. But please connect with the authorities in your city to see if it's better to throw in the garbage or not. Sorry, I think I clicked. Oh, yeah, sorry. And then the data trapper, it's an app developed by us, the UFT Trash team. And you can download it off at the Apple Store, Google Play, and just simply install. It's free onto your device to easily record your data. And we will quickly show you a video tutorial on how to use it. Okay. See you. All right.
Here we are just showing you how to use the app. First, type in your name, the city where you were located, and under site, pick which marina you are within that city. And if your marina has more than one seabin, they will all be listed under seabin ID, and you can pick the one you are currently weighing and emptying. When you open the app, the date and time the bins being removed is automatically inputted. So all you have to fill out is approximately how long your trap has been collecting litter since it was last emptied. Next, fill out whether it has rained in the past 24 hours, what the current wind and weather conditions are. Then, you'll take a photo of the seabin contents, meaning you'll just take a top view photo of the contents within the catch bag. If you were happy with the photo, press Use Photo, and then you'll have a preview of the photo that you'll be submitting. Next, you'll input the final weight of the seabin indicated on your trash scale. And lastly, you'll fill in how full your seabin was, quarter full, half full, or full to the brim. And if there was anything particular you wanted to note down about the seabin, simply type it in the notes and you're ready to submit.
All right. Okay. We understand that we use the terminology specific to the CBIN, but this is intended to be utilized by any device that's emptied daily, and it's updated in the app as well. So now move on to the detailed protocol. You will need a few more materials than the simple data protocol, and a few of each you will have to construct yourself, which is pretty fun. And I highlighted here in the red arrow, so is the sieve. So you have to build your own sieves for that, and we have all the instructions in our protocol. But we have ensured all of these materials can be easily found at your local hardware stores or an online store. So it's pretty easy to find those materials. All of these materials is listed in the resource package you will receive after the workshop, and are also available to find in our website. So it's all materials that you can find, and EPP, of course, you can see in this picture. Move on to the actual protocol. I want to emphasize that for those who maintain the trash trapper day to day, you don't have to do this by yourself. This is intended for you, for your waste characterization partner, which can be a local volunteer group, NGO, or university in your area, or if you are motivated and have the time, you are more than welcome to carry this out as well. So first, you need to empty out the contents of your trash capture device, weight it, and record this onto the data sheet that, which I will review in the next slide. Once you record the weight, dump all the contents onto the tarp and begin sorting through all the large liters. Here we define large liter as anything bigger than 3 centimeters. And once you've removed all large liter and quantify and categorize it, you can then move to the next step, which is extracting the small liter, which we define as anything larger than 2 millimeters and smaller than 3 centimeters. Here you take 2 handfuls of the contents leftovers after sorting through the large liters and place it into the bucket and rinse it with water. You then carry out what we call the French press technique, where you place the sieve inside the bucket to separate the small liter from the other contents in the bucket. Then just you press the French press, the sieve, and all the plastic will rise and will float. Then you just dump it all into the 2 millimeter sieves, and you repeat these steps with the remaining contents on your tarp until it's all being washed. Then, depending on how much material presents on your sieve, you subsample or not. You subsample and quantify and categorize all the small debris. So where do you record all this data? For now, you record it on a paper data sheet, which we will transfer onto an Excel spreadsheet. This paper data sheet will be used until we can also incorporate this data collection into the CleanSwell app, which is coming pretty soon, and Sarah will present about that. And the protocol and data sheets will be provided to you in the resources package and will be found in our network website. It's as Hannah already sent the links to you all. And here is a picture. I just wanted to highlight that we have tested these protocols with the CBINs, LidaTrap, and a few other technologies, and thus far they work and are very effective, and we are trying to adapt it for other technologies as well. We envision people across the globe, which are represented by these red stars here, utilizing this protocol and adapting them based on their device and the environment, so we can harmonize our data collection to compare it across sites to help us better inform the sources and types of litter we are diverting. With this data, we can implement changes together, and which is fundamental. So we have more power when we are working together. And I will pass to Sarah, who will explain about the data, where the data will go in the future.
Thank you, Rafa. Hello, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. So I'm just going to wrap up this session on data collection with what we've kind of been hinting to throughout the workshop today, and that is where we're headed. Very excited to head in this direction of data collection for the International Trash Trap Network. So next slide, please. So some of this might be familiar to a handful of you if you're familiar with the way that we have collected data over the 35+ year history of the International Coastal Cleanup. You might recall it started with paper data cards, and just within the last 5-6 years or so, we've kind of moved into the digital space and are happily using CleanSwell now with this global community to do just what Rafa was explaining, right? Just getting harmonized data from volunteers across the globe so that we can kind of track trends in a more unified way and kind of have a bit more leverage in the advocacy work and all of the research that the data help inform. So CleanSwell has been that really great tool for us, especially during the pandemic as well. It is free to download on Google and Apple Store. You can scan the QR code if you want and download and follow along as I talk through some of the ins and outs. So right now, the app is just developed for those doing a shoreline, a typical cleanup on foot, just like a volunteer cleanup event. And then there's also a section, or in the menu, you'll see an option for recording a past cleanup. That is more for those who maybe did a cleanup filling a bag of trash, but they weren't able to, for any reason, collect really specific itemized data. So that's what that route's for. But on the other side of the home screen menu, we're very excited. You'll see there, it says coming soon, trash trap data collection. And that's really what we're focusing on today. And really just a new avenue in the way that volunteers can collect this really valuable debris data. So that would be specifically for this network to utilize, and your waste characterization partners, making it as user-friendly and simple to use and available in as many languages as possible for those who have maybe volunteered to help with your data collection, especially that really detailed characterization that Rafa just spoke to. So next slide, please. Oh, so here it is again. Just that's the home screen front and center that I was just speaking to, where you've kind of got a carousel menu of cleanup options with the ITTN option being built in, so that we can record these debris data from trash capture devices specifically. So we really did take inspiration from the Data Trapper app that Rafa and her team had developed specifically for sea-bins, but of course other devices as well. And then in this route within CleanSwell, we will have options for both those collecting data with a simple characterization as well as the detailed characterization. So there will be a series of questions and prompts so that we can ensure that we're getting as much information as possible from whoever might be emptying your trap that day. And I always do mention, if you can allow location services to be turned on while you have the app open, regardless of what type of cleanup you're doing, it's very helpful. You'll see is in a couple slides, the data are all tracked over to an online open access database that is map-based. So it's helpful to know and utilize your device's internal GPS so that we can know where in the world you're emptying your trash trap. So next slide, please. Right, so we will have this trash collection device option. It will look similar to some of the screens that you see here, but again, more customized for this network. And what's really exciting is that we're kind of in the building process as we speak. So you're kind of joining at a really great time where we would love to have your feedback. Perhaps you have a group that would be interested in raising your hand to be beta testers of what this particular trash trap cleanup route might look like on CleanSwell. We would love to hear from you. But right now, just to kind of show you a sample, if you're unfamiliar with the app, the center screen grab here is the typical collection screen of a normal volunteer cleanup event, right? So you'll see it's very icon heavy so that even youth can get excited about the app and they can just tap on the icons as these items are found. Obviously, this screen is just showing macro debris, but with the ITTN route, we'll also have a spot for volunteers who are doing the French press method and really pulling out all of the little micro debris items as well, and being able to characterize what types of small plastics or other debris those might be as well. So there'll be kind of a screen for larger micro or macro debris, and then the smaller, the tiny trash, the micro debris. And so a lot of it could look the same, or it might look different depending on the needs of this network. So please do let us know if you're interested in being involved in kind of this creation process as we move along, and hopefully get this route built into CleanSwell. I think we could safely say by the end of 2023, it should be an option that's up and running. So next slide, please. I think we just have a couple more here. So really just wanted to touch on, okay, so once that system is in place, where would my data go? Very valid question. And of course, one of the really big goals in creating CleanSwell from the get-go was to make sure that partners have access to the data from the cleanups that they are leading. That is very, very important piece of the international coastal cleanup, and we imagine will remain a very important piece for the ITTN, this network as well. You might have a network of bins or collection capture devices eventually, and you might have different volunteer groups or waste characterization partners collecting those data. So we definitely want to make sure that you have access to where all of those valuable numbers head. And this is the TIDES database where all those numbers feed. And right now it just holds, international coastal cleanup data, cleanup, by foot data, even some underwater and watercraft cleanup data. So again, there'll just be kind of a new layer built into the system for trash trap data. It will kind of be a different layer within this view, so that you can pull not only summaries about all the trash traps within this ITTN network as we expand globally, but also summary reports on just your own trash trap or collection of trash traps that you might eventually have taking part in the initiative. Next slide, please. So within the CleanSwell app, there's a really cool spot where you can put your group name. We'll build in a similar route for the trash capture device section, and it will ask probably what type of device you're working with, right? Is it a Lita trap? Is it a band-along, as shown in this example? There's all sorts of technologies out there, right? As we learned from Hannah earlier, and maybe even your own device could be added to that list on the CleanSwell app. And then there's other ways that you can kind of tag or identify your device beyond that. Maybe it's a specific group or your organization name that you also want to use to tag those data to, if that makes sense. So then when you go into this online database, and our team would be happy to show you how this works, you can then search for your group name or your device name within the database, and then it would filter out just those data that you're looking for. So we already have a lot of groups doing this for the international coastal cleanup, and it's a similar model, just looking for your specific data on your trash trap. So I think that's it. I kind of covered that real quickly there, but if you have any specific questions about the data, our emails are all here, as well as kind of our broader team social media handles. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions, if I'm not mistaken. So please feel free to raise your hand or put any questions for us in the chat.
We have one question in the chat. Can the Data Trapper app be used offline and uploaded later? Can you create a custom collection screen in the CleanSwell app? Can CleanSwell app be used offline? For the Data Trapper, yes, I believe you can upload later. And you just need to submit when you have internet. Yes, and then I think the other question is, Sarah, you can answer.
Yeah, Monique, great questions. Yeah, so for CleanSwell, I kind of glazed over that, but it would need to be downloaded in advance with Wi-Fi, just like any other app. But then once the user has it downloaded on their phone, they can use it anywhere, even without cellular service, no Wi-Fi. We've even used the app on airplane mode just to save phone battery. So that's a great question. So yes, what CleanSwell does is it'll just save the data to your device. And then when you're back in range, it'll just automatically shoot off to that TIDES online database. And then to your question about custom collection screens, we're working on it. The tricky part there is to find this balance between unified data that can be globally comparable, and then while also allowing partners to be able to track those items of local concern that might be specific to your region or even further locality. So we're brainstorming some ideas of maybe adding some extra fields at the end of the collection screen, but for the most part, in the way that the app works now, there's a standard set of trash categories that we ask volunteers to collect globally. And then in the Tides database, you can add other items of local concern, but we're just not quite there yet with the app. We're building it out as we speak.
Another question, can the CleanSwell from Lysani, can the CleanSwell app be used for manual cleanups on shorelines and beaches?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's there for right now. That's kind of its bread and butter, if you will. So yeah, definitely usable that way. And if you have questions about how that works, we've got all sorts of instructions and tutorials as well. Yeah, so please get in touch.
That's a very good. I didn't know that about Prelude. They just shared that we cannot download the Data Trapper app. It's set up for an old Android version. An upcoming update. Thanks for letting me know. We were using testing the Trapper lately and was working, but thanks for flag this. Because now we are not collecting data because it's winter here, so we don't have traps. So we are not using that much this month, but thanks for letting us know. Do we have more time? We have one more question. Also, what data sheet does CleanSwell use? We use the IUCN one.
Yes, CleanSwell uses a list of items that have been strategically selected over 35 years of the International Coastal Cleanup. So it's our own list that we've come up with based on what we've the research that we've done with leading scientists in the field, where the policy and advocacy work is headed. So it's primarily plastic items. It's primarily the common consumer single-use items that you are most likely to come across in a beach cleanup, most likely, or coastal cleanup. That said, we have many inland partners, and we also work with partners who utilize very different types of data collection methodologies, and we can make it work. So happy to chat further. It's tough. You're never going to find a unified methodology that makes everyone happy, but we strive to at least have the database hold as much data as possible from all of these different IUCN, OSPAR, whatever methodology you might be using. So yeah, please do reach out and we can chat further about making the data more unified.
And I think we should go to the next. I think maybe you have one more question. So I could and CleanSwell app, among item list, it has tampon but no pad. Should I type pad as a tampon or just others? Sarah, do you know?
Great question, Uni. I would put that in other plastic waste for now. And then that's a good example of, if you're finding a lot of that particular item, we'll have like an other items field that you could kind of type that in later. So yeah, thank you for that.
All right. So thank you so much. And if you have more questions, we might have more time at the end. Or you can shoot us an email, send to all the groups. I think now we are good to go for the next group. This is a communication, and I think the first it's gonna be Susan. Is that correct? So Susan will all talk about communication, and they will all answer the questions what we do as a communication and how we engage with people and the public. All right, so the floor is yours.
We'll get started in a moment. We'll just get our presentation set up.
Indeed. Can we all see the presentation okay?
Yes, I can see it.
Wonderful. Great. Well, welcome to our final session. Thank you for sticking with us. Last, but hopefully not least, we are going to be speaking to you about communications, tools, and tactics that you can use to maximize the success of your trash trapping efforts. We have titled our presentation, Why You Should Put Googly Eyes on Your Trash Trap. And I think we hope that by the end of this session, you have some big ideas of your own for trash trapping communications. But before we get started, we'll introduce ourselves. Hello, I am Maddie Black. I am a manager of communications for the Trash Free Seas team at Ocean Conservancy. I'll pass it to Susan, who will pass it to Robyn.
Yes, hi, I do our volunteer engagement and community programs, the U of T trash team, and we actually formed around this idea of hopefully bringing a trash wheel to the city of Toronto, and it was the googly eyes that really captured our attention to this device. So I'll turn it over to Robyn, but I can't emphasize enough how important googly eyes are.
I'm really happy to hear that. I'm Robyn. I'm a senior manager of digital campaigns at Ocean Conservancy. But before I was in that position, I was part of the team that put googly eyes on your trash trap. So I'll be talking both about my experience at Ocean Conservancy and my experience with Mr. Trash Wheel and that googly-eyed handsome man you see before you. So when we're talking about a trash trap serves a very specific need, which is collecting trash. But really, when you think about the communication campaign, it has potential to do so much more. And so really this session is about how you can use your trash trap, not just as a way to keep ocean plastics out of the ocean, but also to really help your organization in a variety of ways. The trash trap is public. It's in view of so many people. And when you really think about the communications and the presence of that trash trap, you're able to create fundraisers around it because people can see the impact it's having in its community. This picture right here is like a really clear photo of the trash and debris that Mr. Trash Wheel is keeping out of the river. And trash traps provide a really great visual hook to really help people understand the impact your organization is having. And it can really drive media attention and behavior change throughout your program need, just through having this one tool there for education and for awareness. People can really see the amount of trash or the types of trash there, so it can really encourage behavior change campaigns. It can be an advocacy tool, so you can show like, we've collected so many plastic bottles or so much polystyrene, and so then they can become an advocacy tool for bans. It's a clear and friendly way. One of the great things, byproducts of googly eyes, and I'm going to just say, like, there are a lot of ways you can have communications beyond googly eyes. We'll just use that as an example. But one of the things of putting eyes, which are that kind of window into like personification, is it creates this really friendly figure that engages people throughout the community, but especially children, and can provide that vital link to education for both them and their families. And in the case of the trash wheel, like, we were able to have an international presence by really thinking about the way this trash trapper can serve beyond what it is doing in our river and what it can do to really communicate the work that we're doing in Baltimore.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robyn. Great introduction to what we'll be talking about tonight / today. But first, a little bit of level setting. As you all know at this point, the ITTN is a collaboration between Ocean Conservancy's International Coastal Cleanup and the U of T trash team. Robyn and I both work at Ocean Conservancy on the trash program. Susan is at U of T. But we all have sort of overlapping skill sets. We have expertise in community outreach communications and reaching just the general public directly. We have experience with traditional media communications, meaning any media that has a journalist involved. So broadcast, newspapers, magazines, radio, etc. And then, of course, we have experience in reaching people through social media and digital channels. So I think you all know what that is, and I will pass it back over to Robyn to speak a little bit more about that area.
So I want to give you just an example of what the potential of that trash trap is. This is an example of like what our fans have taken the seed of what we built in Baltimore and made it entirely their own, from costumes for the celebration of Halloween in America, to tattoos, as you see on that man's arm, to art projects. Every year we do a fan fest where artists and just people who are passionate across the community actually make these incredible pieces of fan art. And they are all inspired not only by the trash trap and the personification and the social media of that trash trap, but then are learning more about our mission. So really the potential that communication has is getting people very excited about this weird new thing that's in their community, and using that as an in way to get people very excited about ocean conservation and removing plastics from our waterways. So how do you do that? Unfortunately, it is probably not as easy as just putting googly eyes on a trash trap. We might be a little misleading there, but there are some really key principles that no matter what you decide your idea is, you can apply to your campaign. The first is making sure you know who your audience is and where they live. So this means understanding who are the people you want to engage, and where are they already communicating online. So for instance, for Ocean Conservancy, one of the big way is that we reach a lot of people who are curious about the ocean. That's a big way that people come in, because once they're curious about the ocean, we can give them that information and they can get involved in ocean conservation. So we actually spend a lot of time looking at Google and other search sites and seeing like, what are people searching around the organization, and can we build blogs or other content that answers their questions, but answers their questions with a note that says, hey, I see that you're really curious about octopuses. Have you ever thought about the challenges they're facing in the ocean and how you can get involved through Ocean Conservancy? So that's one way of where we've identified where our audience is, what they are already looking for, and we're meeting them there in that space that they already are. Another way that I like to talk about is like for the trash wheel, we are taking things that are trending in our community and throughout the country. So this is Dolly Parton, the famous country singer, but as a trash wheel. And so it's a really silly way to connect to something that people are already celebrating her birthday. So how can we insert the trash wheel into that conversation? The other way that you can do this is making it personal. So people don't like to communicate with organizations, they like to communicate with people. And so part of your work as an organization is really thinking about how you create that persona that feels human and real. And good news, you guys are human, so it's very easy to figure out what that is. Thinking about developing your voice and sharing personal stories. So the quickest way to develop that persona is to coming from the heart, is to look at what motivates you, what motivates your organization, and how can you share the things that you're really passionate about with your community. And so, another way, like one way you can do that too is like, it doesn't have to be a one-way conversation. It can also be about interactivity. So why I'm passionate about, but also having that curiosity for what brings other people into that space, encouraging the interactivity to help build that community that helps power your communication campaign. So 2 examples here is one of them, and we'll talk about bringing people in for data collection. We just talked about data collection, but one of the real powers of bringing people into data collection is really getting people to like get into the muck of our work and see the amount of bottles, the amount of plastic bags, the amount of food wrappers that are in our trash with their own eyes. That can be a really powerful experience. And it's one that's really fostered by bringing people in. So this is an example of the dumpster dive with the trash wheel. We actually get a dumpster from the trash wheel and we ask volunteers to come separate and sort the trash. This provides a really important data tool to figure out what's in the trash, but it also provides a really great interactivity tool. For Ocean Conservancy, we did a text campaign where we did like a quiz to figure out what ocean animal they're in. They are and how their personality matches with ocean animal personality traits. And so it's another way of like really relating who you are as a person and how that relates to the ocean, to your community, and to the work of your trash trapper.
Great. And so now here's an example of how you can continue to personalize things that actually, this is a great example where there's no googly eyes involved, but you can still have a lot of fun and be really creative and connect directly with your community that you have just built up by using these more personalized tactics. This is a group in Vancouver, British Columbia that has installed sea bins. And what they did is they had a contest encouraging a naming of a bin, which is a popular concept around the world. And this was one of the winners. An actor named Steven Seagal was the chosen name. So Sea Bin Seagal was one of the chosen winners, which is very funny if you're familiar with the actor, but also just memorable. And, you know, can be a serious topic, but it also means we can still have a lot of fun as we're doing this and encourage those groups to get into their creative side and really remember what you're working on from a different perspective. Go to the next example. So this is some work that we've done in Toronto. You've seen the slide already of the coffee cup. As you can tell, it's one that we really love for very good reason. This was what we tweeted out about it. But when you're making things personalized, you can also connect not just at the end of your campaign, but as things are happening, to carry that conversation and connect in with your community really closely. So these two on the right, so the coffee cup I'll go back to, this was a great conversation that we went into about why what we so often hear about a paper cup isn't actually necessarily a paper cup because of this inner lining. And we knew where this cup was sourced from, because if you're from the area, there's some very distinct wrapping still attached to the cup. And I believe the lid actually was found just like that. We didn't stage the photo. It was found as intact as it is here. And that created that conversation about single use and why it remains in the environment after you think it's already gone. And we found that because it was within the bins. The one on the very right is something found in a lot of sewer systems, and it's congealed masses that we found in some of our collections this year because it was closer to storm drain outputs. So it's called a fatberg, which is also a memorable name. When we shared this information, it actually got a lot of media exposure too, and opened up a lot of interesting conversations with our team. And then the one on the left isn't so much something that we were reporting on as it happened, but trying to make it personal to Toronto specifically. It's in our logo. Raccoons are very, very connected to our audience. So we use that as an example of our total weight from that year's report.
And the other thing is that being able to be creative. So googly eyes are one creative way, but there are a lot of other ways. One of the things that I am most proud about it in the trash wheel is we actually created a secret society as a way to get people engaged. So we opened up registrations for people who wanted to join this secret group of people who are devoted to the trash wheel and devoted to helping the rivers and streams of Baltimore. In order to join that group, people had to do different environmental actions within their community, from reserving the fats, oils, and greases to prevent fatbergs, like Susan talked about, to looking at your river and stream and noticing any sort of like environmental toxins in the area, to doing water testing. Every person had to do these series of environmental actions in order to join this secret society. And what we found was, by being a little bit more creative in doing this we ended up doing a whole ceremony with robes and like a whole performance to bring people in. But by doing this in a creative way, we were able to get almost 50% of our list engaged in this secret society. And of those people who engaged, about 80% of them were able to complete. And for the first time, anybody who's managed an event sometimes knows that you have a bunch of people who say they're coming and nobody shows up. And this is the first time in my life that more people came than who said they were coming. and we were expecting a rainstorm. It was like raining on the crowd, and everybody basically was like staying within the rain because they were so committed. And I think that's really the potential of that creativity and thinking about how you can do the communications in a way that is fun and engaging and brings a lot of joy into the community can really encourage people and can spur that behavior change and that policy change that your trash trapper has the potential to enact.
And so another extension of something we mentioned in terms of engaging with your community and interacting is actually taking them using a go behind the scenes approach and kind of showing them, taking a peek behind the work that you do and involving them directly. So we spoke about the dumpster dive that happened with the trash wheel. We applied that with our sea bins, and this was also mentioned in some of our earlier presentations. Actually, that image on the right with Rafaela at the table has been used quite frequently. It's a great representation of the day, which, as you can see from the center picture, we had our team out here showing the methods, discussing about our work. So we began with an introduction about the larger topic. And so they got to have that general awareness, get their hands dirty, learn in real time. And a secondary benefit of this type of event was for us in particular, is most of our team are students that we hired on for the summer. So this also gave them a really great firsthand science communication experience as well. So there was benefit not only for the public, but also within our team to expand upon that skill set. So it was a great day. We actually hosted 2 of these last year, and we'll be doing many more of them this year as well.
And then I know I often tell to people who have trash traps when going behind the scenes is that your trash traps are in a public place, which means the public sees your trash traps oftentimes more than you do. Because they're passing by, because they happen to be in that area. And so they might notice things before you do. And sometimes letting them in on the day-to-day of your trash trap could be a really great hook to get them very invested. So an example is we had a ball python wrap itself around our battery pack on the trash wheel. Now, they are not native at all to Baltimore. This was definitely a pet that had escaped, but we ended up tweeting about it and talking to the press about it, and it inspired a beer, it inspired a lot of articles, and it still is a very big part of our communications today, is this random thing that happened there. Sometimes those things are really good. Sometimes those things are things like, one time we had a really bad rainstorm and a kayaker got very close to the trash wheel, and people who had seen that kayaker notified us before we were even aware. And so one of the things that you really need to do when you have a trash trap is have those plans in place of like, who's monitoring it. In the case of the trash trap, we have a live stream camera that allows us to be able to remotely monitor the trash trap and see what's going on with it. And making sure you have those opportunities for monitoring, that you have people on call for creating those quick responses. And in general, you have a plan in place for like who's responsible, what are those communication pieces, and how you can quickly respond, because as we know, time and time again with social media, things can spiral out of control very quickly. And so really being able to quickly see and respond to what's happening with your trash trap is very crucial, and it can sometimes positively create a really great media moment.
And I just wanted to share this example. We showed the live in-person ability to see our methods, but it's also something you can apply to digital sharing on your social platforms. You can celebrate your team and share who it is that's doing the work day in and day out on these devices. So this is our field team from the past summer, and a cameo from a local raccoon. It's definitely real in the picture. And on the right here, we shared it in a different format to walk you through the steps of collecting. We put it in a much more publicly accessible visual to really, in a simple way, show what they would do throughout a day in the field. So just to remember that even something that you do day to day is really interesting content to share with the public.
Yeah, so on that note, things that we do day to day that are interesting to the public, data. Data, as previously mentioned, is a great way into media attention of all varieties. It can help inform a campaign focus, and that's what most of these examples on this slide are. In 2019, food wrappers overtook cigarette butts as the #1 most collected item as part of the International Coastal Cleanup. That was the first year that had ever happened, and media are interested in trends. So we were able to show them this trend of cigarette butts and then a change in the trend. So that data hook was really compelling for media as well as other campaign pieces. We used that food wrapper hook to help activate our audience. We created a food wrapper challenge that encouraged our social media audience to audit essentially their food wrapper usage and just take a look at how many they were using every day. It can also fuel advocacy. We put together an action alert that called for, as part of the food wrapper challenge. I forget what the action alert was. I'm sorry. It's 8:30 at night. I'm tired. But it can help fuel advocacy and create a call to action around specific items. And it can be an interesting news hook. You can see here the headline that we used for the food wrapper and cigarette butt story. But overall, data is a really compelling piece for media.
And then shared in the data, talking about policy, I just wanted to share, obviously we can't read all of the content here, but this is our policy brief. So we create one of these every year with our data summary, and we're just now in the process for the past year's data of sending it to the decision makers in our area with a very high level recap of what we found. And then based on that and our team's research, we give some guided suggestions of how we can be applying what we've learned to some real decision and change making in the area. And then just wanted to touch on our school programs a little bit. We can talk at great length for that, but I actually think we had some really great presentations earlier that really dove specifically into education by Monique specifically. That was really a thrill to watch, but I wanted to share where we touch on it in our current school programs with the U of T Trash Team. We have a lesson where we are encouraging the students to come up with their own solution. They've spent lessons leading up to this, learning about plastic, and now we work with them with what they've learned. We give them some inspiration, what could be some potential solutions, guide them through worksheets to do that. And of course, some potential solutions would be technologies, whether they're on land or in water. And it's a really great way using the trash traps to not just connect to youth in classrooms, but also inspire future leaders and future innovators. So there's so many different ways you can take this within education. This is just a small sample of some of the ways that we have begun to explore trash traps in our own education programs.
Yeah, and so finally, one of the last things we'll leave you with are just some tips for reaching traditional media. So you have your trash trap, you have all this awesome data, you have these awesome stories. How do you get that into the hands of newspapers, magazines, broadcast, all of these channels that you don't necessarily have direct access to? There's a few ways to go about that. And there's no secret sauce, you don't have full control over this, but there's a few things you can do to help maximize your chances. Timeliness is key. If you have new data to share, that is always catnip to journalists. I know we see that every year with the ICC, even if it's not particularly new to us. If we can say, we have new 2021 data for you, 100,000 foam pieces were collected off of your beach, like that's interesting, especially to local news outlets. Again, these people aren't necessarily working on these issues day to day. It can still be compelling to them, even if it seems mundane to you, perhaps. On that note, specificity is key. Get to know the journalists and media outlets in your area. Get to know what they're covering, get to know what they're interested in. If you can connect your pitch to a specific story that a journalist has written, that's always really helpful. And just keeping it as specific as possible. Impactful, putting things in scale, right? So we can talk about cigarette butts as pollution, but again, I think Chelsea mentioned a while ago, a lot of people don't know that cigarette butts are plastic. You can talk about the impact of microplastics. You can talk about the scale of these problems and put it into context for journalists. Again, they don't know, they don't have the insights that we all have on some things. And then finally, this goes back to one of our previous slides, just be prepared for questions. You know, people have questions about trash trappers and how they work. And, you know, be prepared for hard questions. That's a journalist job, and you're not always going to get them, but just best practices, be ready for them. Have talking points prepared ahead of time and have those materials in hand before you go to the press. And so that's our comms presentation. I think just the next step is sharing all of the awesome stories from the network. So we currently don't have ITTN specific social channels, but we have the Ocean Conservancy channels and we have the U of T channels, and we're on all major social media platforms. And you can share your stories with us if you want us to share on social media. We're always looking for things to share from these networks. So you can email us at info@trashtrapnetwork.org. You can join our Facebook group at Trash Trap Network, or use our hashtag, which is just #trappingtrash, and we keep an eye on that. So if you have your own, you know, Python story to share, #trappingtrash, and hopefully we'll see it and share it out, because trash trappers are cool, man. And we're excited about them. So that is our presentation. I know we are pretty much at time, but are there any questions?
I will add too, there was an image of it on one of the slides. So Hannah will be hard at work creating some personalized certificates after you've submitted your data that we really want you to celebrate within your group, but then that's also already made for you and ready to share however works within your group.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
We're just looking to see if there's any questions, just a few comments. Thank you so much. Yes, it's something, you know, call us the communications experts. It's also something that's continually changing too. So we're always learning and keeping an eye on what works and what types of messaging are more appropriate. Yes, trash traps are cool. Okay, well, if no one has any questions, we can transition it back, and unless anyone wants to share anything in the chat about their own experiences, you can always connect back to that general info. If you have any questions that you want to direct back to us, you can email Hannah. Let's contact there. Okay.
Hey. Okay, thanks everyone for those great presentations. And as Susan just mentioned, any follow-up questions, just let us know. You can contact all of us. We'll share our contact details after the workshop. But for now, we are a little bit ahead of schedule because we started this last session a little bit early and we were a little bit speedy. So we will not keep you here any longer than we need to. We will wrap up. So I've got a couple of final slides before we finish. So we're just coming to the end of the workshop, and I guess we'd really just like to take a moment to thank you all for coming and for being involved in the workshop today and for asking questions and sharing your stories. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our guest speakers, Pei and Monique. Thank you for sharing your local examples of trash trapping and all the things that come with it, and thank you for being part of the event today. So today we explored many topics surrounding trash trapping as part of the solution to plastic pollution, and gained valuable insights and perspectives from our speakers and from each other. And so we hope the information and knowledge shared today will be helpful to you in the future. And I finally just want to acknowledge the hard work and contributions of everyone involved in organising and executing this workshop. So thank you to the ITTN team. Without your efforts, this event would not have been possible. For those of you who are interested in joining the network, just a quick reminder that all you need to do is let us know. You can dig around our website and find all the resources you need for free. You can contact us if you have any questions, and as soon as you're ready or you have your trash trap installed, you can begin collecting harmonized data, and you can also connect with other groups globally through our social media channels and through the network. If you're not quite ready to be part of the network, you don't have a trap, but you're interested in learning more and you want to stay in touch for news and updates, we do have a mailing list, and we'll share a link in that chat just before we close up. So yeah, you can join the mailing list and keep up to date with what's happening in the world of the ITTN also. So one last thing, I just want to hear from you before we close up. So if anybody wants to share one thing that you've learned from today's workshop, you can just share that in the chat now, just so we have some final nice things to reflect back on. I feel like I've learned, I actually can't even pinpoint one thing that I've learned, but I definitely in the final presentation, I think there's a lot of insight there about the comm side of things that I think a lot of us from the environmental world or the NGO world don't always think about if you're in the thick of the science or the research. So I thought that was really insightful. Okay, so I think we can close up. I just have one final slide. Not going to work. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. I can see in the chat people are saying thank you. So please, yeah, keep in touch. We have all of our social media channels on there, so you can reach us on there. But yeah, once again, thanks for coming. Thanks for being involved, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes now in case anyone has any last things to share. And if not, then you are free to leave and log off. So thank you all. Thanks everyone for sharing your things that you've learned. They were great. The importance of collecting data, simple methods in small traps. Fantastic. Thank you very much for those.